on it right now, please.
Okay, it's live.
Wait, can you guys go to the other room and try? See if it's working.
Yeah.
I'm also gonna.
It hasn't started for me yet.
Did it start for you?
No, I guess it might take a bit. I'm gonna open again. Like reopen.
Careful, Sarah.
Yeah, we're on it right now.
Okay. Hello. Hello.
Wait, you should go out. Okay, this was the second option because it'd be nice to get the option.
Wait, just capture the adjusted.
Also, it looks like it has full battery because of the computer.
Is it siphoning battery from your laptop? Okay. Does it go higher?
No, it shouldn't be high. It should be.
I think it's.
I'm so sorry. This is not the best way to do it, but maybe we could.
I think that's fun. Okay, that looks good.
Testing.
Okay, just try to keep down the. You can keep this down. to get.
I think that's good.
So Howard, this is keynote speaker.
This one's still gonna, I don't think, yeah. But this one and that one are good.
Yeah, we could move this. Wait, I'm gonna move mine. Yours to another side. Oh, yeah, I know. Okay,
Do you want to?
I know yours. That'd be best. And after I sit here, I'm gonna also.
Wait, I
But it should be fine.
So as soon as you show up, switch your thing around. Thank you for coming. show we should start up because Richard okay, they'll all come.
Yeah, I'll let you guys go. I just wanted to stop by and say hi.
Welcome everyone. Thanks for taking time to attend the Dolphin Tank. We're starting a few minutes late, but we'll try to catch up. We'll start off with, okay, before that, my name is Aditya. I'm the Director of Partnerships here at Johns Hopkins CBID program. And I work with the faculty, the students, and everyone, manage the corporate partnerships, recruitment. So with that said, we'll start off with introductions and then followed by the Dolphin Tank presentation. The 4 CB teams will be presenting. We have a wonderful lineup of judges, and of course we'll have the introduction by judges a little later. Then followed by a brief break and a keynote talk by Mir Imran, who's a CBID board member, but also a serial entrepreneur, started multiple medical device companies. You'll hear a wonderful story about Mir, his background, and all the wonderful things he has done over the years. And then it will be followed with awards and reception. With that, I would hand over the mic to Yusuf Yazdi, Executive Director of the CBID.
Thank you so much. This is an exciting competition for us. Most of our presentations are geared toward focusing on the quality of the presentations in terms of design, how well they really thought through a good healthcare innovation design process. But this particular event is more about prepping them for the season for business plan competitions. So you won't hear a lot about the underlying technology that they're presenting, but you'll hear a lot more about other aspects that are critical. CBID has been an incredibly successful program. We're now in our 17th year, and we have an excellent cohort of some of the very successful graduates of the program. And Aditi here keeps track of each and every single one of them, knows where they are, and helps new students find jobs in their companies and connect them up to. And they also, our alums, have been instrumental in getting their companies to sponsor projects back to us. So it's an amazing virtuous cycle. A lot of projects, we worked with just about every single clinical department at Johns Hopkins University. We worked across the School of Public Health, Nursing, Chicago, just about APL, just about everyone. I don't think we've done any project with Peabody. We need to do one with Peabody. And we've worked with all the leading medtech corporations, and I especially want to thank J&J for their sponsorship of this event. And we've had some amazing spin-outs. A lot of them have been incubated and supported right here through the PAVA Center, and you'll hear more about that from Josh in a minute, about the amazing support that the university is providing. Hopkins is the place to be if you want to do academic-based early-stage innovation. It provides an amazing ecosystem. It wasn't here when I got here 16, 17 years ago, and it's been an amazing transformation and revolution in this institution. And I think there's no better place to learn the process and to have access to world-class clinical and scientific expertise than Johns Hopkins University. And that is really, the spin-outs are really a testament to those sort of resources that are available. The process we teach at CBID is all about identifying and understanding 4 key areas that are essential to success in healthcare innovation. The world of medicine, the world of business, the world of engineering, and the world of entrepreneurship. We don't intend our engineers to become doctors, but they must be conversant in the clinical problem. We don't intend our physicians to become engineers, but they must be conversant and productive members of a team that includes engineers. Ditto for business and entrepreneurship. And all 4 of these dimensions, you'll see the projects are on solid footing. And what we teach in our program is how to actually cover all these bases in 1 year, and how a successful medtech innovator, whether it's a 1-year project or a 5-year startup, has to eventually cover all of these bases. And how do you do it in a frugal manner? I won't give you that boring lecture right now, and the CBID students will breathe a sigh of relief if they've heard it already. But that's what we teach at CBID, how to do this in a frugal, cost-efficient, time-efficient manner. And we do these projects not only in the US, but one of the core elements of our program is the focus on global health innovation. How do you innovate for places where the only $200 or $100 per year is spent on healthcare per person? And we do these projects around the world. That's not what you'll be hearing today. Today is all about their US projects. But I just want to note that if you're interested in CBID and interested in learning about healthcare innovation, a core element of that is how to innovate in places where cost constraints are a central element. So with that, I'd like to again thank J&J MedTech. They sponsored this event. They also sponsor our design competition, which is coming up when? In less than a month from now. A month from now will be the Johns Hopkins design competition. So with that, I'd like to invite Josh, and thank you so much. This is the first time we're having it here, so thank you for hosting us here.
Thank you, Dr. Yazdi. Again, my name is Josh Ambrose, and I have the privilege of being the director here at the PAVA Center for Entrepreneurship. For those that have never been in our space before, I just wanted to share a couple of quick facts. We run over 7 accelerators in 10 different iterations throughout the year, from early stage all the way up to advanced support. We give out grants, we have mentorship, all kinds of industry connections, and I'm joined in that work by a large number of student staff and our professional staff, some of which are sitting over here. Deja, Paul, Flynn, and others, and many of the students here in the room know them very well. Let's give them a round of applause. They did a lot of work today. We work with over 200 different teams per year, and those teams, both current and alumni, have gone on so far in the last half decade to raise over $325 million. And again, some of those founders are here in the room today. And continued congratulations to them. So many folks from CBID have come and worked here over the last few years, and when I got here to campus about 5 years ago, Dr. Yazdi was the first person, one of the very first people I met, and he was sure to tell me right away why this was the best BME program in the country. And I got to tell you, each and every week of working with the exceptional staff and faculty, and most of all the students, I have found that to be incredibly true and very exciting to work with. It's a privilege. And I think about this a lot as someone who works with startups every day, is that, well, let me ask you this. Has anyone here seen the TV show Silicon Valley? Little show of hands. For you young founders in the room, I offer this suggestion with some trepidation because it is a crass but funny show. It is really, really good homework for what the VC world is like and what the startup world is like. Even though it came out a number of years ago, it still holds very true. And in the first season, there is this repeated gag where every founder gets up on stage and says, and making the world a better place. Like, they have to make sure they shoehorn that phrase into each and every pitch, that their goal is to make the world a better place. It's funny, and it can become cliche, especially when it doesn't ring true. But what I so appreciate about working with you all in this program, and working again with your exceptional staff and faculty, is that that is not just a cliche mantra. That is core to why you are here and what you are doing. And I don't know about you, but I wake up in the morning and I read the headlines, or I talk to my wife in the hospital, or I talk to someone else that's dealing with a problem. And the problems, the bad news in the world is prolific. There's a lot of it. And I think even within our program, sometimes we have a propensity to focus on the negative. What's not going right with my ideation? What are the challenges that I'm facing? What are the criticisms about my small market size, whatever the case may be? And I think those are all good thought exercises, and they are important. But I encourage you founders here in the room, and those that are coming around to support them, that I think what our world needs, what the startup community needs, what our ecosystem needs, is for us to really celebrate the good things. And your path toward making an impact on the world may look different from a tech bro in a TV show. It may look different from a storied career of someone with a blood test machine. It may look unique and special, as Dr. Yazdi was just referring to, about being strategic about your next steps. But I think it's so important to keep that why, that drive, that focus on doing good at the core of what you do. And in that work, whatever shape that it takes and whatever your next steps may look like, that's what my team and I wake up every day and try to come and help you with. And so that commitment remains the same no matter what your next steps are. So as you hear feedback and you think about your next steps here today, I just want you to know that we are joining and celebrating you and wishing you every bit of success on your next steps. Thank you very much. Thanks, Josh.
So let the fun and games begin. You all ready? Okay, my name is Shoma Acharya. I'm a faculty member here at the Johns Hopkins Bioengineering Engineering Department and program director for the CBID Master's program. I've been doing this now for 15, 16 years. This has always been a fun event every year. I think this is the 12th or 13th year we're having the Shark Tank event. We used to call it Shark Tank. Now we mellowed it down a little bit for Dolphin Tank. But just to give some context for you judges, thank you first of all for your time. This is such a wonderful opportunity for our students to learn. As you heard from Dr. Yazdi, we're trying to, students in this program not just learning the engineering, they're of course learning how to identify real problems that have a meaningful societal impact if solved, and a meaningful commercial opportunity. For context, all the projects you'll hear today were identified by the teams themselves during their clinical rotations at Johns Hopkins Hospital and associated hospitals. They have an intense about 3 months of clinical rotations starting in June. So they just started all of this in June of last year. They go through many departments, divisions, and then they zone into one thematic area, and the teams keep going back to the clinic, interacting, and you'll probably hear in their presentations. Each team has, without exception, interacted with hundreds and hundreds of clinicians, observed, hundreds of person hours worth of procedures, workflows, followed the patient journey, also talked to value analysis committees, tried to understand the commercial opportunity associated with the problem. So they went from hundreds of needs that they identified themselves during the end of summer to the one need that is their project for the remainder of the year. In terms of timelines, where they are now, somewhat early to mid-spring semester, they have started to work on multiple conceptual solutions to this. Most teams have now come up with one kind of prototypical solution. Today, since it's a non-confidential presentation, since it's an open to public presentation, for intellectual property reasons, they will not be talking about details of their actual design. We do that. Trust us when we say that we hold them to very high rigorous standards of engineering on that. And on Monday, they actually have their midterms where we have a bunch of engineering people doing a full design review of the technical solution. Today is about how they're able to articulate the value proposition and the business case of the problem that they're working on. So I hope that is context, important context for you judges, because a lot of you might be wondering, well, is this an anti-gravity machine that they're trying to peddle? Please have that conversation with them over, reception, and they can explain, I'm sure, how the technical details. All of you judges have, so the task is they will present for 10 minutes their story, modeled maybe loosely on Dragon's Den, Shark Tank. And as you are investors, you have $500. I think you can see one of our students printed them out, especially for each one of you, customized Monopoly money. You can think of that as a proxy for, I don't know, $500,000. But the teams will actually get the money. They'll actually get cash, beer money for the weekend, or to put it towards their projects for the rest of the semester. After you hear their pitches, you will have some time to confer within yourselves, have a discussion, and then each judge actually will come up during the award ceremony, will come up and give some proportion of their money to each of the 4 teams. You might, if you choose, give all your $500 to one team and none to the others, which is somewhat atypical. Or, which is more typical, is you give some proportion depending on how you might invest in those teams. And what is more valuable than that, of course, is your feedback. Like why you chose to do your investment a particular way. What do you like about the presentation? What are the things they should think about going forward? This is also the beginning of business plan season for these teams. So our teams historically compete at major national business plan competitions, Wharton, Harvard, everywhere, and historically Rice business plan competition. And our teams have historically won first place in many of these top business plan competitions, but it starts here. So this is the first time they'll get some tough love, and with that, they will kind of modify their story if and as needed, and then hit the actual circuit and win some real money. So that's how it will go. 10 minutes, and teams, as I told you, there's our wonderful timekeeper, Natasha, in the back. So she'll give you a 5-minute warning with a big sign, and a 2-minute warning, and a 1-minute warning. Okay. After which we will have a terrible bout of cough, and then we'll push you off stage. So don't veer off your time too much, please. Okay. With that, yes. So with that, all the best to the teams, and now I invite the judges to introduce themselves.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Hemingway, and I'm the founder and managing partner of Ecfora Capital. We are Maryland's premier medtech venture capital firm, so I'm paying attention today at multiple levels. We have deployed $26 million over the past 3 years into 14 really incredible Maryland-based startups.
My name is Rick Hewen. I'm the CEO of Lynchholm Medical. It's a respiratory solution for places that don't have respiratory monitoring today. So we deliver an OR quality respiratory profile to the patient bedside, avoids big IPO events. Prior to that, a couple other startups that we built and sold, and prior to that, Fortune 500.
You all are going to hear a lot from me, so I'm going to spare you. My name is Mir Imran. I'm an entrepreneur like you.
Hi everyone, I'm Famida Kapadia. I am the founder of Amplify MedTech, through which we support the MedTech startups in the ecosystem. And I'm also the managing director of UT Ventures, which is an emerging fund that I'm raising to invest in medtech startups.
And I'm Howard Carolyn. I'm the co-founder of a startup called CoapTech. Some of you may know is Logsdon. Dr. Logsdon's husband is Steve Trapello. He was my co-founder in this company, and Dr. Trapello is an ICU physician. He'd invented a minimally invasive surgical product. I formed the company with him, and we commercialized an adult and pediatric device, raised over $25 million, recipient of about 5 NIH grants. Deb and Ecfora helped invest in the company early on, and thank you, Deb. And we have supported CBID in lots of ways over the years, including some internships and even some jobs to some CBID folks. So we really appreciate CBID and happy to be here today. So thank you.
Get started. With that, let the fun and games begin. First team, come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are DEXA Diagnostics, and we're focused on enabling timely detection and intervention in acute compartment syndrome. Does anyone recognize this Olympic skier? So this is Lindsey Vonn. She's an American alpine ski racer who recently competed at the 2026 Winter Olympics. On February 8th, when she was competing in Milan, Lindsey experienced a traumatic crash. She suffered a severe tibial fracture and had to be airlifted to the emergency room. Once there, the doctors treated any injuries that they could see or that they suspected, so the fracture as well as any lacerations and potential head injuries. However, within Lindsey's injured leg, pressure was rising silently and inconspicuously within the muscle. Her muscles swelled up. Blood flow to her leg decreased, and just last week, Lindsey narrowly escaped an amputation. Compartment syndrome progresses silently, and by the time pain turns into paralysis, the window of time to save muscles, nerves, and sometimes the limb itself has already closed. Lindsey is one of 700,000 Americans at risk for developing acute compartment syndrome annually. Acute compartment syndrome, or ACS, is a condition characterized by rising pressure within a muscle compartment, usually happening after a fracture or other traumatic injury. This pressure compresses the nerves and blood vessels in the limb, cutting off circulation. If not treated in a timely fashion, irreversible limb damage can occur in as little as 6 to 8 hours. This next slide contains sensitive medical imagery. And we want to be mindful of our audience, but at the same time, this image is really important to understand the true morbidity of ACS. So treatment for acute compartment syndrome is a fasciotomy, surgically slicing open the entire limb to relieve the pressure in the muscle. And out of the 25,000 confirmed cases of acute compartment syndrome every year, nearly 100% of these patients will undergo this fasciotomy. If performed within 6 hours, recovery approaches 100%. However, if performed beyond 12 hours, 92% of patients will not recover, and the limb must be amputated. 10% of the ACS cases every year end in an amputation, which is approximately 2,500 patients. So outcomes depend entirely on timing. However, this is where the current system breaks down. Diagnosis today relies very heavily on physical exam findings, such as pain out of proportion, sensory changes, and swelling, as you can see. However, the issue is that these signs are subjective, variable, and often show up too late. So by the time the limb looks like this, it's too late to do anything. When objective confirmation is needed, the standard involves inserting a needle directly into the muscle compartment to measure the pressure. But the issue here is that this method is invasive, operator dependent, and can only be used in late stages of ACS. So clinicians are faced with a dangerous trade-off. Wait for this certainty later, once the pressure has risen and tissue has necrosed, and risk permanent damage, amputation, or sepsis, or act without certainty earlier and perform unnecessary surgery on a patient who may not actually have acute compartment syndrome. In fact, 35% of fasciotomies are performed on patients who don't have ACS, which is approximately 9,000 unnecessary fasciotomies per year. So the issue here is diagnostic uncertainty. There is no continuous, objective, and reliable signal. And the consequences are severe. Untimely diagnosis, in addition to causing unnecessary fasciotomies, also leads to permanent nerve damage, muscle necrosis, disability, and amputation. And these complications lead to a downstream cost of about $200 million in the US alone from infections, longer hospitalizations, and rehab. Preventing even a single amputation would save hundreds of thousands of dollars in life. Measurements, less invasive treatment, and seamless integration into ED workflows. The result? The right diagnosis at the right time with the right intervention. Our perspective is grounded in real clinical environments. We've spent over 300 hours shadowing in emergency and trauma settings. We've interviewed over 50 emergency physicians, trauma surgeons, and medtech leaders, and we've reviewed over 100 papers to validate this unmet clinical need and identify gaps in the space. And across specialties, we heard the same themes. ACS is devastating, diagnosis is delayed, current tools are invasive and ineffective, and there's an urgent need for a timely and objective detection method.
Existing products in the market provide access to pressure measurement, but they remain invasive, placement sensitive, operator dependent, and fail to provide that timely indication that patients so desperately need. No solution satisfies all the user requirements identified. So where does that leave us? We've identified obvious technological gaps, a clearly validated need, and an unequivocal value proposition. Now, to translate that value to revenue. Hospitals purchase a reusable monitoring unit as a one-time capital expense. Each patient requires a sterile, single-use disposable component, reducing risk for cross-contamination and creating a recurring revenue stream. This razor blade model aligns with the current standard of care, allowing for seamless integration. With competitive pricing to current diagnostic tools and utilization of the same CPT codes and reimbursement pathways, adoption of DEXA diagnostics is designed to be low friction. We are uniquely positioned to dominate not only the market of patients who are suspected of compartment syndrome, but also those who are at risk for developing compartment syndrome. We've identified the 5 most common causes for acute compartment syndrome that puts patients at risk. Aggregately, this amounts to 709,000 patients, setting our TAM at $1.5 billion. Literature shows that 66% of severely injured patients are treated at level 1 or level 2 trauma centers. This amounts to 468,000 patients, setting our SAM at $988 million. We will begin market penetration by targeting 20 level 1 trauma centers. These are the academic medical centers, known for leading innovation and welcoming new technology. Each one sees roughly 500 patients a year at risk of acute compartment syndrome. This amounts to 10,000 patients across 20 level 1 centers. Now, our obtainable market accounts for a little less than 10% penetration of the 256. And with a 7.7% CAGR, we have promising growth potential. Presently, we've prioritized customer discovery with the hospital decision makers and clinicians who will eventually adopt and pay for the solution. In this stage, we're iterating on the product, strategically protecting IP, and conducting benchtop tests on cadaver and animal models. In our next step, we will finalize safety and effectiveness, freeze our design, and move into 510K FDA submission. It is then that we will gather the clinical and commercial data needed for clinical adoption, as well as conduct usability tests as we prepare for manufacturing, scale-up, and commercialization. Our go-to-market path is very straightforward. Using the partnerships that we've already gathered, we'll begin locally, and then we'll expand to regional and national trauma centers through founder-led sales. With strong clinical evidence and reputable partners, we will surely influence adoption. We have a preclinical validation pathway through Johns Hopkins University affiliated labs where we conduct animal and cadaver studies. We've garnered the support of clinical champions in this space who provide us direct access to high-level trauma 1 centers. And given our strong relevance to extremity and blast injuries, we're also engaging the United States Department of War to explore aligned, non-dilutive funding pathways. We are a team built for success. We are comprised of mechanical and biomedical engineers, as well as a medical student. This combines device design, manufacturing, and frontline clinical perspective. We not only have the skills necessary, but the passion and the dedication to change patient outcomes. Our mentorship team spans emergency medicine, trauma surgery, commercialization, regulatory strategy, and with Dr. Lucas Ramcharan and Dr. Joseph Saccharin anchoring our clinical perspective, and Mark Gelfand's extensive experience in device design, this gives us the experience and the expertise to transform from concept to clinical adoption. Acute compartment syndrome is time critical. Timely intervention creates better outcomes. DEXA Diagnostics is eager to transform how this devastating condition is identified and managed. We are raising $300,000 safe with a $4 million valuation cap and a 20% discount. We ask that you join us on our journey to change patient outcomes and bring DEXA Diagnostics to patients. Thank you for listening. Please connect with us via this QR code, and we open the floor to questions.
We have approximately 20 minutes for questions, and questions are reserved exclusively for the judges. Please.
All right, great job, team. Okay, let's dive into the value proposition a little bit more. I heard you guys mention 4 things that were important: timely, non-invasive, reliable, operator independent. Which of those is most important? What brings the most value? And how do those relate to cost?
Sorry, we actually have a slide in our notes. We have a slide in our notes to this.
earlier earlier treatment to patients. So being able to find it earlier would allow for less morbidity on the treatment side. And this translates downstream to less length of stay, or a lower length of stay. Again, lots of costs associated with that. And open fasciotomies, about 20% of them lead to infection. So we are looking at being able to intervene with, or we're looking to enable intervening with a treatment where they don't have to actually do an open fasciotomy. They can do a type of treatment called prophylactic fasciotomy. So that timely detection of compartment syndrome really adds up to a way larger value proposition down the line.
And then tell me a little more about the cost of implementing this, cost savings, per case.
We actually have a slide on this as well, so this is going to be.
I'm just going to go down all of it.
Okay. So while I'm trying to pull this up, so in terms of cost, we did illustrate that this was $2,000 per use for the capital equipment. And the way that we really modeled this is based off of the current devices that they're using now. So we've illustrated now that the standard diagnostic device is the Stryker needle. However, for a multitude of reasons which we've identified, it has not been very effective in terms of operator dependency, in terms of not adequately being reproducible. And so that one is actually this. So it's $2,000. We've actually modeled our cost based on that. So from that, we see here that they have a capital equipment cost of $2,000. They also have a consumable cost of $25 per use. And from that, we really modeled down to the ROI for the hospital being around 27x. Hope that answers your question.
So since we're on that, but do you have estimated COGS in there for your device?
Yeah, so this is for our device as well. So really we're trying to model what the current CFOs and the current procurement specialists are looking for when they
so 25 is your cost to manufacture, or is it the cost the customer pays?
So this is the customer paying.
So you have an estimate on manufacturing costs?
So we're still obtaining that data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Great job on some really important areas like the market. Everybody showed us it's a $50 trillion market, and then it boils down. And yours actually builds up from an understandable and a realistic starting point, 10,000 patients, that are in these 20 centers. An investor will take away from that is, all right, 20 centers, I get it, 10,000 patients spread across those. Those are manageable starting points. That's really, really nice. And then you also allude to a continuing multi-site study, which is critical because the data the data you need for FDA clearance is invisible compared to the data you need for actual adoption, and lots miss that. So it's really, really, really good. I'm curious though, how you build that data. Like what is just how do you build that data? Where are you going to go? And contract research organization internally.
I think it's a great question. I think study design is one of the most important parts. It's scalability of a research study to show and demonstrate that evidence early on that what you're doing is actually going to demonstrate positive outcomes and change in a patient's trajectory. And a lot of that roots back into, one, designing the right study, and two, scaling that up to the right centers. And so with regard to study design, it's fairly straightforward in that we've identified a high-risk population for developing acute compartment syndrome comprised of the top 5 traumatic causes of compartment syndrome. Scaling that up, I have the privilege of being on the executive council for the Association for Academic Surgeries. These are academic surgeons coming around from all around the United States, and I essentially interface with them very frequently. These are chairs of departments, large academic centers. So these are people that I can reach out to, shoot a text message over and say, hey, we're working on this device, we're hoping to improve the trajectory of patients' outcomes, and they're all very invested and would be interested in having a conversation and scaling that up. So that's kind of the path going forward.
If Lindsay Vaughn didn't have her doctor traveling with her, she might have lost her life. Yes.
What's the cost of amputation?
I think that's a great question. And it's hard to put one number to. The cost of an amputation is not a number you can put a number to. It's a patient's life. Changes the way you live. You can no longer potentially walk the way you do, live your life the way you do. And I don't feel comfortable citing a metric or a number, even though there might be one, and assigning value to that.
And who owns the patient?
And who owns the patient?
Yeah, when the patient comes in, who's looking after which physician?
So when they first come into the hospital, it'll be the emergency room doctor, so the ED attending is responsible for their care. And when they're there, they have to keep an eye on them and make sure that they're not progressing. If you imagine a very busy emergency room where there's so much going on, there's so much acuity, so many different patients, trying to be attentive to a process that might or might not develop is challenging. And so oftentimes when a patient has a traumatic injury, there could be a process underlying that's developing, but doesn't get attention until the patient is screaming out in pain. And so that's a challenge. And so descaling this and being able to have this operate in the hands of, say, a nurse that might be assigned on a 1-to-3 ratio, 1-to-4 ratio, using this as a way to expand care and allow for earlier intervention. In our current model, when there's a tremendous amount of pain and all this going on, the physician will come in, do the exam, and reach out to the orthopedic surgery team, which even then, it's a challenge bringing them out of what they may be actively doing into the ED to inspect a patient. And in conversations, anecdotally, orthopedic surgeons will say, oh, like the ED is consulting, I'm not sure if this might be compartment syndrome, probably not, and that creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is what damages patients' lives.
So you'd have to train the ER physicians in doing the diagnosis and the surgeons, right? So it's and ER physicians don't have time. That's one thing that they don't have. They rush through. So these patients could fall through the cracks, get worse, and then get amputated. So have you taken into consideration how many would actually get the benefit of your device, your diagnosis?
I think this is a great question. And I think the operator dependence aspect is very important in recognizing that, the way a person uses a device is going to influence the success and performance of that device and who benefits and who actually gets a change in their clinical trajectory. And so thinking about this, acute compartment syndrome is a very anatomic process. And so understanding the anatomy of an individual's leg, for example, is essentially the core foundation of the amount of knowledge they need to have to be able to say, hey, the anterior compartment of your leg or your periphery is at the forefront. I'm going to position this device over it and scan it. And so it's really tying the anatomy with the device and putting the two together, which allows for lower threshold of interventions. And this is something that, pretty much every clinical member of the team is trained on. We all go through our anatomy lectures or physiology lectures and consistently reference it, especially in ED. And so this allows for nurses and PAs and NPs and physicians all alike to be able to use this.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So to follow up on what Dr. Mir was asking, who is your user? Who is actually going to be using the device and at what point?
Yes, so for our device, we intend for, because we're once cells trauma centers, we intend for the physicians to be the first people to be able to put this on the patient. And like Mir, you said, the ED physicians are very busy, so they can put it on and leave it to monitor that patient and then come back and check on it on intermittent checkpoints based on how worried they are about that patient. And we heard this from ED physicians as well, where if there is a patient that they're trying to determine what their risk is for any sort of progression of a disease state, they'll have that in the back of their mind to be able to go back and check on that patient intermittently. So we know that that will fall into their workflow. On the other side of this, where on the surgery side, for trauma surgeons or orthopedic surgeons who might want to use this during surgery, then that would be a secondary user as well.
What about nurses?
We don't intend for the nurses to be the ones placing this on the patient. However, the nurses would be able to tell that the trend is dangerous for the patient and be able to report that back to the attending of this patient needs to be looked at.
So can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on why not nurses? Is there a training element required? Is that why nurses cannot use it? And how long would it take for your device to scan the patient?
Yeah, so I can address the first question. Essentially what we're looking at is the reimbursement pathway as well. So this is currently being reimbursed under CPT code 2950, which is physician dependent. And so that procedure itself is a physician dependent procedure. Therefore, that's why we are targeting physicians as opposed to nurses. And if I understand your second question correctly, can you repeat it one more time for me, please?
So one of you said, I forget which one, that you would leave the device on the patient and the device will continue scanning the patient. So how long does it take to scan the patient?
So we're still working through that on benchtop testing. However, we're really focused on looking at trends in the pressure. Something that's really important with our device that other devices haven't really capitalized on yet is the pressure trends as opposed to point-of-care pressure measurements.
So I have a couple more questions. You talked about 510K class 2. Do you know what your predicate is?
Yes. Let me pull that up actually. Oh. So we have two potential predicates. Mile 1 being our first predicate. They are a minimally invasive pressure monitoring. So they have a needle that goes into the compartment and it stays there to measure over time. And then Premium is the second option where they measure compressibility of the compartment. And both of these have been approved through 510Ks, and so we're looking at using either one.
So based on that, how long do you think it'll take you to take this product to market? When do you expect market entry?
I believe with the proposed timeline we showed that by the end of 2031 we want it to begin market launch.
Right. Last question is, you guys talked about IP. Have you filed for IP, or is that something in the plan?
That is something in the plan.
Thank you.
Hey guys, really good job, first of all. I think this is something that could become real. You're taking something that is today subjective and making it objective, which is a great objective. Nice. And I like the way you're going about it. One thing, if we're all allocating funding up here, I'd like to understand a little bit more about is what you're going to do with the $300,000 that you propose to raise in your seed round. Do you have a slide on that, or can you walk me through it?
Yeah, of course. I can go over here toward detailed use of funds, but essentially that will cover our first milestone with a little bit of contingency. So first and foremost, customer discovery, business plan competitions, other forms of getting ourselves out there, marketing to other people, other forms of non-dilutive funding to help offset some of the costs as we progress through these different milestones. Further, with product development, I mean, there's material refinement that we still need to do, really taking this from the benchtop prototype to something that's commercializable. From there, we really hope to get into preliminary evidence generation, as I said before, benchtop testing, but really testing this in cadavers. We've seen through multiple studies that this is actively being done. We know that the literature supports this. We just need to validate it with our product. Further, intellectual property is what's mentioned in response to the last question. Our patents, legal oversight, consulting fees, so on and so forth.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that answer. You also mentioned DoD or DoW funding, and I really believe you could probably do most of this company on that if you really focus and hit it hard. That's something probably to get going on early, so bucket in some grant writing support or find a great guy and go and do that would be my strong recommendation, because I think DoD would be looking for solutions in this space that are more reliable. Last question, to actually get this to patients in 2021, as you mentioned, do you have an estimate on the number of patients? This is ultimately going to be a sensitivity versus specificity problem, right? And you need to be able to do that really well in real patients in a messy environment and all these things. Do you have an estimate on the number of patients you think you're going to need to reach an endpoint that FDA is going to be satisfied with? I know you haven't had any conversations with the FDA, no problem there, but just from the clinical literature, how messy of a problem is it? If compartment syndrome is happening, is it really clear and easy to detect? And the problem is that we don't have good real-time monitoring? Or is it that compartment syndrome is really muddy and kind of like vague and hard to detect? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Howard. So the clinical presentation of this, as Rani had mentioned, is fairly obvious but very late stage. So it becomes really muddy in the early detection phase where we can actually do some more prophylactic treatments for these patients. As a result of that, that's where we really want the DEXA diagnostics to come into play. Oh, yeah, sure.
Sorry to just chime in a little bit on the study design aspect of it. I think, alluding to the numbers and specific numbers, I would look into the probably around like 2,000 or 3,000 patients that are at risk of developing this, which seems like a lot initially, but then you think about the traumas that come into level 1 trauma centers. It's a very active place, and so that's kind of the group of patients that we'd be targeting. And as far as kind of the trials and how that would look, there's an interesting phenomenon that happens in trials where if you notice that an intervention is serving such positive benefit in the patient's outcome, you can actually cut your trial short if you're demonstrating that it's a positive intervention. So while the kind of initial estimate that we're looking at might be quite large, we are hoping to kind of follow down this pathway of showing that our intervention, if we're detecting it very early on, would actually allow for us to pause our trial short so we can continue to expand this to large groups of people. The target inclusion population is the number of patients that we would show of those groups of larger patients, the thousands I've mentioned, the people that actually have acute compartment syndrome. So these are surveillance versus people that are actually having it.
So do you anticipate that this device could be used to assess all trauma patients ahead of time?
So I think this is a great question, and I think this would be the high-risk patients. So one thing that we think about when you have a trauma patient coming in is what do we want to do? And time is very critical, and so everything that we're doing takes away from something else that you could be doing. And so in a high-risk patient, following high-risk fracture physiologies, those are the groups that we would probably want to intervene in. So when a patient comes in, we get their x-rays, we recognize, hey, it's a tibial plateau fracture. This is probably a patient we want to put this on versus a patient that maybe has like a fall on penile stand and injury to the radius or the ulna, maybe not as much worried about.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you, team. All right. Good job. Next team, ready when you are. Come on.
Good afternoon, Dolphins. We are Akita, and we are transforming maternal care with comprehensive monitoring of pregnancy-related acute kidney injury. Mary is a 35-year-old woman with chronic hypertension in her second trimester of pregnancy. Mary's OBGYN refers her to a maternal fetal medicine. Sorry, 1 second. Mary is a 35-year-old woman with chronic hypertension in her second trimester of pregnancy. Mary's OBGYN refers her to see a maternal fetal medicine specialist, which happens to be 4 hours away from where Mary lives. With Mary having a full-time career, she must take multiple days off of work a month for her appointments. At Mary's 32-week appointment, something is off. Mary has a spike in her blood pressure. Her doctor takes a blood test to see her creatinine levels are through the roof. Even with clinical intervention, Mary's acute renal event is so severe, she gives birth to her baby 8 weeks early with NICU admission, costing an additional $50,000. After pregnancy, Mary is required to go on dialysis as her renal function never recovers. She feels stagnant in her career and detached from her family because of her debilitating condition. But if the onset of Mary's AKI was caught sooner, her renal damage could have been reversed before any complications ensued. Mary's story is an example of a pregnancy complicated by renal injury. 1 in 6 pregnancies in the United States are at risk of a similar experience as Mary, with renal injury increasing the risk of maternal death by 1,200% and increasing the risk of neonate death by 470%. Renal injury in pregnancy is a whopping $1.3 billion cost burden on our healthcare system every year. Pregnant patients with pre-existing chronic conditions are at a significantly increased risk of developing pregnancy-related acute kidney injury, or as we refer to it, PRACI. Patients with diabetes mellitus are at a 4.4 times increased risk. Patients with chronic hypertension are at a 5.5 times increased risk. And those with chronic kidney disease are at a 21.7 times increased risk of developing pregnancy-related acute kidney injury. These chronic disease populations are on the rise in the United States, meaning the incidence of PRACI will continue to compound each and every year. The current standard of care for assessing renal function in pregnancy is a serum creatinine test. These tests are done infrequently throughout the course of pregnancy, as seen by the timeline here and marked by these purple X's, presenting significant gaps in monitoring throughout the pregnancy. Additional serum creatinine tests are only conducted if the clinician suspects the patient may have renal injury, such as the patient having increased blood pressure or symptomatic onset, an extremely reactive process. Furthermore, we do know that creatinine is a flawed metric. It lags 24 to 48 hours after initial renal injury onset and only noticeably changes after 50% or more of renal function has been lost. PRACI can develop within hours to days, further emphasizing the point that the current standard of care is inadequate. Enter Akita, an at-home monitoring solution for assessing renal function in this pregnant population to fill the care gaps for the patients that need it most. The Akita utilizes pregnancy-validated parameters to assess renal function in the comfort of the patient's home, thus reducing the significant geographic barriers associated with specialized maternal care. Akita is able to generate trends which provides valuable patient information to clinicians and acts as a proactive care tool to ensure these patients' care plans are getting adjusted and timely intervention for reversing renal injury. Finally, Akita has the ability to reduce hospitalizations and lower the risk of adverse complications in this patient population. Akita is a combined hardware and software approach that uses informed and proactive monitoring. Our hardware consists of a blood pressure measurement taken daily, as well as a creatinine and blood urea nitrogen measurement taken biweekly using our novel technology, a non-venous and painless blood draw. The data collected from our hardware is then integrated into the software in the form of a trend for clinicians to view weekly. With Akita, we are able to provide more frequent and more consistent monitoring in between routine appointments to ensure an acute renal event is not missed. With our device being able to map trends in our patients' health and clinicians being able to view this data both virtually and in the clinic, Akita serves as an actionable triaging tool to ensure these patients are getting the care they deserve. Existing solutions for diagnosing and triaging for PRACI are inadequate. Blood panels and 24-hour urine tests require clinic visits and labs to process the results, creating a large burden on the patient. Solutions like the Minuteful Kidney and smart blood pressure monitors offer the at-home convenience, but they do not perform a comprehensive renal assessment and therefore cannot provide the full clinical picture to physicians. Our solution, Akita, satisfies all of these needs by combining a comprehensive renal assessment and automated trend generation into one platform that patients can use from their own homes. Our beachhead market is 10 MFM centers where we already have strong clinician relationships, That's a $2.6 million market of concentrated high-risk obstetric patients. Our serviceable obtainable market are pregnant patients with chronic kidney disease, hypertension, and diabetes, a $300 million market segment where severe renal impairment drives maternal complications like brachy and preeclampsia. By winning in these concentrated, high-acuity patient populations first, we generate the clinical validation and workflow integration we need to expand further to the broader pregnant population with a risk factor for preeclampsia, and eventually to the non-pregnant chronic kidney disease population in the United States. These people are at a significantly increased risk of developing acute kidney injury and would also benefit from an at-home monitoring solution. Akita will follow a B2B business model. We will partner directly with maternal fetal medicine centers, where maternal fetal medicine specialists, or MFMs, will prescribe Akita to their patients at risk of brachy. These patients can then pick up their devices at their MFM centers during a routine prenatal visit. Our pricing model starts with a $140 one-time purchase for the base unit, and then $60 per month for the disposable units. That's $500 over the course of 6 months of monitoring during their pregnancy. So starting at 20 weeks gestation through 6 weeks postpartum, where we know renal injury is likely to occur in these patients. Our solution offers both savings and revenue potential to our key stakeholder groups. Patients could save an average of $90 per visit in travel-related expenses and lost wages by utilizing a hybrid care approach, which is a care model that these patients actually prefer. Payers can save $20,000 per patient from complication-related expenses, with the main cost drivers being an increased delivery cost due to brachy, as well as the infant cost for a preterm birth and a NICU admission. And lastly, maternal fetal medicine centers can profit over $250,000 annually from using existing reimbursement codes and having their providers interact with the data Akita provides. We plan to secure our market position through a robust and defensible IP strategy. We're pursuing both design and utility patents to protect our novel at-home form factor and innovative hardware-software solution. We will file as a Class II medical device via the 510(k) pathway with clear predicates to support an efficient approval process. And lastly, for reimbursement, Akita will fall under existing remote patient monitoring codes, providing an immediate incentive for both hospital systems to wish to purchase our technology and providers to adopt it into their clinical workflows.
Our beachhead, demonstrated by this map here, begins at 10 high-volume centers near our existing key opinion leaders, such as the Johns Hopkins Medicine and University of Maryland Medical Systems, who manage high-risk patients and house research-focused teams. These centers are ACGME accredited, denoting that they have fellowships in the MFM space, and they're also historically amenable to working with ventures. These centers manage over 5,000 pregnancies annually, which allow us to rapidly validate our clinical outcomes and refine our product workflows. We plan to scale from the 10 MFM centers to all 108 ACGME accredited MFM centers across the US. To facilitate this expansion, we will leverage our existing partnerships with the Global Brachy Consortium, Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, and the Preeclampsia Foundation. We have mapped a de-risk path to market entry. Currently, we are developing our MVP. Our pre-seed round will be used to finalize our MVP, file our patents, and complete a usability study. Our seed round will then be used to fund our FDA submission activities. We will raise $3 million in Series A to scale production and commercialize, and $6 million in Series B to translate our product into the non-pregnant CBID population with a clinical study and a second FDA submission. We project a 9-figure exit. This valuation is benchmarked against the recent acquisition of a remote patient monitoring solution with a similar go-to-market strategy in 5 to 7 years. Our core team of 6 Johns Hopkins students combines biomedical engineering, product development, and clinical execution experience. Our mission is backed by an advisory board of MFMs, cardiologists, nephrologists, medical device industry leaders, and our sponsor, Medtronic. Collectively, these industry-leading experts guide our clinical, commercial, and technical strategy while validating our approach. And with this team behind us, we are excited and ready to scale Akita from vision to impact. So now, Dolphins, we are asking for your investment to execute. We are asking for $400,000 as an additional stake loan with a post-money valuation cap of $5 million. This investment will allow us to execute and finalize our MVP, file our patents, and complete a usability study for a successful design freeze. By validating our product with users now,
we are significantly de-risking our seed round and accelerating our entry into the FDA regulatory pathway. We are excited about Akita's transformation of maternal care with a comprehensive assessment of pregnancy-related acute kidney injury. Thank you, and we're looking forward to your questions.
Hey guys, thank you very much, and nice job. I am a father of 3 girls, so this was timely and impactful, so very nicely done. I'm thinking about the solution, and I'm trying to conceive how to best simplify it in terms of workflow, or could you help me understand workflow a little bit more? So there's a test that's done at home by the mother, and that's a non-invasive or safe and non-painful blood test, and that is then inserted into a hardware device, and that interfaces to software that transmits to the EMR. Is that correct? I'm just trying to make sure I've got like the basic workflow of how the product works clinically down.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's important to clarify. So our device would be taking blood pressure non-invasively, but we would also have a small blood draw functionality that would be able to test the blood analytes either bi-weekly. That's what our current understanding of what the best frequency would be.
And is it every 2 weeks or twice a week? Bi-weekly can be either one, right?
Bi-weekly means twice a week.
Twice a week, cool, okay.
Yes. And so that would be done over the course of the time period that we outlined, so about like 20 to 24 weeks gestation, all the way up to 6 weeks postpartum. But ultimately, the amount of time that the monitor would be measuring these parameters would be up to the clinician, up to his or her discretion on what needs to be done. But with our first beachhead market, this is the timeline that we envision would be the most impactful.
Okay. And so the mom takes the blood draw, puts it into something that transmits to the center or to the physician's office. Is that right? I'm just trying to understand. So you've got to plug into the EMR that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a hybrid care model. So it would be able to transmit the data via an app that would connect to a clinical workflow for a provider to see and review weekly. But in addition, with the timeline that we had, where you had those in-person prenatal appointments, the clinician would also be able to read and review that information with the patient.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, it's challenging because you're going to be having to change patient care and you're going to be having to change providers, but they're both very motivated parties. Moms are going to want their kids to be safe, so I think twice a week is not going to be a problem. And then these physicians, can you talk to me a little bit more about the economic incentive that you mentioned for them?
Sure. So, sorry, do you mind repeating the first part of your statement, just so I make sure I address that?
Oh, I was saying you're having to change workflow on a few dimensions, right? For a pregnant person, it's a new workflow for them.
I can touch on that point now. Sure. So actually, we wouldn't be changing the current workflow too much because most of these high-risk patients that we're looking at are already taking their blood pressure at home. So they're taking that twice daily, they're used to doing this, and from the studies we've seen, as well as our clinician and patient interviews, this patient population is actually really compliant with this at-home monitoring, especially because they're reliant on, not only tracking their health, but this is also for their baby.
Yeah, I was leaning towards compliance, but I can absolutely see doing it for a newborn being pretty high. Okay, and then so talk to me about the incentives for the clinic, right, or the physician.
Yeah, so the clinic, as we had said with the current reimbursement codes, is able to profit about $250,000 annually. That would be each clinic, and that's from the existing remote patient monitoring CBT codes that exist. We also know that with these clinicians being able to see these patients more remotely, they'll also be able to see more patients, and with there being a maternal care desert issue in the United States, only 10% of counties actually have a maternal fetal medicine specialist. this is really key in our value proposition so that more patients are receiving the care that they need.
Okay, and remind me, was it diabetes patients, and then was it COPD? What was the other high-risk condition that you flagged?
Diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and chronic hypertension.
Yeah, so these are, yeah, okay. Thanks, those are conditions obviously on the rise, unfortunately. So it's a great problem you're addressing, and good job, guys.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. So my question is, and you brought up an important point about care deserts, right? Is there a possibility for you to have this device directly as a B2C? I know you are pursuing a B2B model. Is there a B2C that you could think about?
We haven't thought about it, but with our patient population and wanting to start with the maternal fetal medicine centers, doing a B2B will allow us to have the larger contracts and really be able to lean on our key opinion leaders to get the product into the patient's hands. Some of our competitors do like a B2C model or more like delivery to the door for their testing. So I think as we scale, that's something we'll consider thinking about. But we want to start with B2B so we can have those larger contracts and patient adoption with the clinicians really putting that for their patients.
And then there are more and more platform technologies that are coming up, right, that are helping address women's health. Are you thinking about partnering with any of those?
Absolutely, and there are 5 companies that we've evaluated as potential acquirers for our solution, 3 of which, as you mentioned, are working in the maternal space, developing a suite specifically for at-home patient monitoring. So these are target potential partners or acquirers that we're looking at down the line. But as a new product venture, we're always looking for more. So we're excited to hear potentially if you know any more for us to look into. Thank you.
Very interesting and good presentation. Question about the reimbursement. Who's going to pay for it, and will that fit into current?
Yeah, great question. So we will be fitting into existing CBT codes. There's, I believe, 5 CBT codes that we'll be fitting into. And these are mainly to do with the setup of the device, the supply of the device every 30 days, as well as the clinicians reading this information. The reimbursement will be provided to the hospital, so this will be something that they are profiting from. And we've looked at some reimbursement programs to model ours off of. So there's currently one at the Mayo Clinic that's a blood pressure monitoring program. And how it works is they receive these BP cuffs and they are prescribing them to their patients. But because of the financial incentive that these reimbursement codes have, the patients actually do not pay any cost for the device, and the hospital absorbs the cost of the device because of the reimbursement and revenue potential they can gain from that.
Competition. Can you talk about that?
Sure. As far as competition, there are some devices out there that look at some aspects of kidney health. So like the Minuteful kidney solution does just analyze in the urine, and it's meant for older people and not validated for the pregnancy population. And then blood pressure alone, there are of course blood pressure monitors, smart blood pressure monitors you can use at home, and those are good because they give blood pressure, but again, they don't give that full clinical picture. So through our customer discovery, working with our clinical mentor, he's mentioned actually all 3 of our parameters being really the trifecta of what's needed to have that full clinical picture for specifically pregnant women in terms of their kidney health. So our competitors do a little bit of each, but we'll be the first one that will be combining them together in an at-home solution specifically.
Okay, thank you.
So regulatory-wise, you talked about the device and the predicate, but you actually have 2 regulatory pathways, if I hear it correctly. You have a device pathway and a software as a medical device. Okay? So you have a clear predicate for the device, but have you thought through the predicates for the software and medical device?
No, that's a great question. I can touch to the first point. As for predicate devices, yes, you're correct. We do have clear predicate devices for our hardware component, including, but as for the software component, That's something we're currently looking into as we're trying to see the best fit on how much overlap our software would be with current EHRs or clinical softwares. We're just taking that into consideration, and that's subject to change as we continue to look into patent analysis, pre-operate, and just looking at other different competitors.
Do a pre-sub pass, right? You'll either have 2 clearances or a predicate reference before you'll figure it out. So my biggest question is competition. It's nothing that was on the screen, and it's just big data in general, right? There's nothing to prevent, a health economics-based company to just start to bundle up hundreds of parameters or dozens of parameters. And have you looked at that at all? It's just pure big data, machine learning approach.
We've looked at that, but we believe that our devices, especially, it's kind of put apart from just looking at like big data that might be able to compile hundreds of parameters because of our specific hardware and how we would deploy it, and how it would be deployed within the pregnancy pathway between MFM centers and pregnant patients. And that was made clear through a lot of our clinical interviews. But as we continue to develop, we're going to keep that into consideration, especially when we consider acquirers and how we might fit into other medical device pathways.
All right, let's dive into some of the clinical outcomes that we'd love to see. Have you thought about what endpoints will prove that this works? How are you finding success? Are you reducing NICU stays? What are the most exciting clinical outcomes?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for that question. We have study plans for our device, as mentioned earlier. So the first one we think of is to ensure the compliance of the device by doing a usability study. So that outcomes we'll have is to have the patients giving us feedback on the compliance of the device to ensure that patient will use the device throughout the pregnancy. And then the more, as you mentioned, about the longer outcomes is we want to prove that our device will help the reductions of adverse outcomes due to acute kidney injuries, such as we mentioned, and then we mentioned throughout the presentation, such as a preterm birth and NICU admission or dialysis in the long run for the mother. So with that, we will do a longitudinal study as a registry study to prove our device compared to standard of care help to reduce those complications. Yeah.
I guess there was an assumption that I was making at least. So if your device identifies that there's an issue, what changes in the course of clinical care? Right? Is that something that once flagged can be corrected in a straightforward manner and prevent these preterm births and these other downstream consequences?
Yes, we also have an appendix on that. There we go. So our device will act as a triage alert for the physicians. So once there's a change in the trend mapping that it flags an abnormal measurement of the parameters, the physician can pulse in the patients to do some tests, to do more further investigations. And then with that, they can identify the root cause of the disease. And then since PrACI has a lot of root causes, it's important to figure out what root cause is causing the injury. And then from there, they can deploy specific interventions based on the root cause. And then with that, our physicians say that they are able to find the most appropriate interventions for the patients.
So I want to go back to the big data piece of it, right? You guys you have hardware that's going to collect a lot of data. That data, your software is going to interface with the EMR to communicate that information. Do you guys have any plans of utilizing that data to help with early interventions or, earlier diagnosis or anything that you can leverage? Because you're going to you'll have a lot of data as patients use it. How will you leverage that data?
Great question. One thing we've definitely noticed about this space and just about maternal care in general is it's severely understudied, and that's across maternal fetal medicine conferences we've gone to, also AHA conferences and kidney conferences. So we do think having this data would first of all really support the maternal care space, bring a lot of awareness to it, and would also be able to help with the furthering of our device as well, emphasizing that. Yeah, this data could be really helpful in advancing maternal care, as renal injury is something that's becoming a hot topic in maternal care.
Is that a part of your strategy?
Yeah.
Have you thought about any alternative strategies like going to market as a measurement device and not as a full-line product?
Absolutely. We've been considering a lot of options, and as a new startup venture, we continue to pursue them. But with our customer discovery, as well as our clinical champions here at Johns Hopkins, we believe currently that this is the most advantageous approach for us to get to market quickly and help impact patients. But as we continue to pursue more customer discovery, we look at other options.
Fatality rate B2C approach without a B2B validation network is extraordinary. So that's smart.
Exactly. As Scott mentioned, one of our competitors actually using a B2C strategy, potentially that's a partnership that we could leverage or a model that we could adopt in the future.
Lots of examples of quick traction.
Good job. Good job.
Fantastic. Come on up. Just going straight, right? No break. No break.
No break? Okay. Wait. Either.
All right, I'm eating up everybody's break, but good afternoon. Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Purva, and I'm excited to present to you Elevair. But before I tell you who we are and what we're doing, I want you to humor me with this little exercise. On the count of 3, I want you to take a deep breath in with me. 1, 2, 3. Hold it. See if you can take another breath on top of that one. And another one on top of that. You can let go now. Did you feel that growing discomfort, that building tightness in your chest? That is daily reality for folks with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. There are 16 million Americans with COPD today, and that is the same tightness in their chest that stops them from doing things like tying their shoelaces, going on a walk, having fun with their friends. This is the reality of dyspnea or breathlessness, and this is one that COPD patients see every day. 90% of patients experience anxiety during episodes. This hits nearly all aspects of their daily life, including social and physical ones. The less that these patients move, the weaker that their muscles get, which makes breathing even harder. These patients are stuck in this vicious cycle of lost functional capacity and air hunger. We spend $24 billion annually on COPD. This is everything from long-term oxygen therapy, inhaled drugs and biologics, pulmonary rehabilitation, and in the very, very last cases, opiates for purely symptom relief. This works for many patients, but there are 3.2 million patients that are still breathless despite trying every single option out there. We know that COPD irreversibly damages the lungs, and it causes patients to have a chronic condition that they must continuously manage. But for these 3.2 million patients, their breathlessness significantly outweighs that structural damage to their lungs. This is called refractory dyspnea, or breathlessness that persists despite trying every single medical option out there. This isn't just a need that we heard from patients, but one that we heard from physicians and as well as researchers. We surveyed over 50 COPD patients, and it validated our most important assumption. Dyspnea touches every aspect of their everyday life, and there's no solution that they have that they're satisfied with. 95% are not satisfied with current solutions. 98% continue to feel demotivated in their daily activities. Patients report being able to pay up to $5,000 for any device that can cure their breathlessness. So let me break down why current solutions and therapies aren't working. Right now, the current solutions are missing the very important part of breathlessness, that is neural. All of the current therapies today are targeting the lung. But for these patients, their lungs are already at the limit. We know that the brain constantly and continuously monitors how folks breathe, for both you and I and COPD patients. For these refractory dyspnea patients, their lungs are impaired, but their body has adapted to it. The lung continues to send signals back to the brain, but there's a big mismatch there. The brain expects the lungs to ventilate and expand a little bit more than it currently is, and that causes the brain to trigger an alarm. It causes a crisis. The brain thinks, why aren't you ventilating more or expanding to that larger capacity? This causes the brain to send the lung signals of increase your respiratory drive, increase your breathing rate, and increases the drive to breathe for this patient. As you can tell, this is a very slippery slope as patients start to lose and decrease their drive to breathe and are feeling continuously anxious. This is a cycle that no inhaler or medication can break. So how do we tap into that? Current solutions missing the neural component of dyspnea. We are looking at Elevare to tap into those brain circuits that are connected to breathing perception that I just explained to you. We are looking to reshape how the brain experiences dyspnea or breathlessness by tapping into those specific neural circuits that we've identified with literature as well as through Elevare. So introducing our product. We are Elevare. We are the first and only non-invasive neural interface that relieves dyspnea on demand. We are looking to improve the perception of airflow for these patients by tapping into those exact neural circuits. One important caveat that I want to say, these patients only have access to opiates for their relief. We are looking to provide a non-addictive and non-systemic solution for these patients. So let me tell you a little bit about how this works in practice. A patient that is experiencing refractory dyspnea or that dyspnea that no medication can break comes into clinic. They go to their respiratory care team. They go to their pulmonologist where they will be then prescribed Elevare. Elevare will be able to provide them on-demand relief from those dyspneic activities, whether that's in recovery or during those activities and exercises. We're looking to change the reality of every day for patients so they don't dread having to do things like climbing upstairs or doing their chores. This is Elevare.
Thank you, Purva. Now that we know the problem we're solving, how urgent it is, and our novel approach to it, let's talk about how we bring this to patients. Elevare offers value on all sides of the prescription. For patients, it's non-pharmacological symptom relief that they control themselves. For providers, it's an opiate-sparing alternative they've never had before. But our impact goes beyond symptom relief in the moment. Elevare breaks the dyspnea anxiety cycle. It's that neurological feedback loop where your breathlessness triggers anxiety and the anxiety makes breathlessness work. By breaking this cycle, we actually allow patients to move more, to do more. All of a sudden, they don't have to dread pulmonary rehab and muscle conditioning. Their functional capacity improves over time. And the economic savings impact follows from this. A 39% reduction in pharmacy costs, 37% fewer outpatient clinic visits, and 32% reduction in inpatient care utilization. This potential for savings, as well as the detailed COGS analysis, informs our pricing. Our device is priced at $500 per unit for a one-time sale, with recurring revenue from consumables like electrode pads priced at a $25 a month subscription. Our per unit cost is $62, and this is informed by a quote we obtained from Antong Industrials, a manufacturing house in Taiwan. This translates to an 87% gross margin, which is well aligned with industry standards. So what does the market supporting these unit economics look like? We know that COPD is a high burden problem. It is in fact the third most costly chronic disease for the US healthcare system. Even when focusing on 7.4 million patients with severe dyspnea, we have a $3.7 billion total addressable market. Within that, our $1.6 billion SAM focuses on patients with refractory dyspnea or breathlessness that persists despite maximal medical management. We're looking to start in a group of patients that are on high deductible healthcare plans and HSA spending. This is basically a discretionary patient-controlled budget that doesn't require reimbursement approval. They can use it for any medical need with the letter of medical necessity from their provider. This represents a $364 million opportunity as our SOM. So these numbers are pretty ambitious. How do we get here? Our go-to-market strategy has three phases. We start by selling to specialized breathlessness clinics. So this is a model of clinic that exists outside of and often in addition to traditional pulmonology and lung disease practices. They focus on the management of dyspnea. It's a small number of sites with our exact patient population, and we also already have existing relationships at these sites. From here, we move to the over 2,200 private pulmonology practices across the US, employing a wholesale B2B2C model, where clinics purchase Elevare in bulk, they prescribe it to patients for short-term use, and they earn on a rental model. We're looking to start in the Northeast, given the region's dense provider networks and proximity to Baltimore. Both of these phases capture our SOM, where we're relying on patients to use their HSA spending to pay for the device's rental, and we don't need a reimbursement code just yet. But what they also do is generate the real-world evidence we need to move to phase 3 and pursue payer coverage. So Elevare can be made accessible at a national scale, such that any pulmonologist in the country can prescribe it and patients can directly purchase it. In terms of where we currently stand, we filed a provisional patent, covering the nerves we've identified, the method to stimulate them for this indication, as well as various embodiments. We have a pre-submission under legal review, and we have a structured series of benchtop experiments underway on healthy volunteers to characterize the therapeutic window, optimize stimulation parameters, and inform device design. We're collaborating with the Johns Hopkins Breathlessness Clinic, and we have an IRB under review for a 2-cohort clinical study. The first is looking at tolerability and mechanistic feasibility in healthy volunteers, and the second will evaluate efficacy in advanced COPD patients. This study allows us to generate proof of concept clinical data at the earliest stages and build confidence in our venture, as well as inform MVP design. Our path to market has 3 funding stages. Our first $50,000 in non-dilutive funding builds our initial prototype, completes benchtop testing, and files our provisional patent. The second $300,000 raise builds our MVP, completes the feasibility study I talked about earlier, as well as our FDA pre-submission package. And our third raise of $4.5 million takes us through the pivotal clinical trial and clearance as a Class 2 de novo device with breakthrough device designation, and allows us for commercial launch. Our team combines clinical, engineering, regulatory, entrepreneurial, and product design experience. But I think what makes us the right team to solve this problem is where we started. We spent months alongside patients in pulmonology and critical care settings, and we saw firsthand how debilitating dyspnea really is. We're backed by clinical KOLs in pulmonology, including the heads of dyspnea clinics at Hopkins and Utah Health, medtech entrepreneurs with prior exits, and experts in neuromodulation, regulatory strategy, and health economics. Today, we're raising $300,000 with a $3 million valuation cap to achieve the endpoints listed on this slide. This is what stands between where we are today and a device that's built, tested, protected, and on the FDA's radar. This raise is the critical first step in bringing Elevare into patients' hands. So Dolphins, we're asking for your support in helping us give patients back the moments that matter. Thank you for your time. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you. Great job. So it's neurostimulation for non-opioid pain relief. Are there any therapeutic benefits that come from using it? Or maybe you don't know that yet. And how long does it take for for the effects to take place, for the patient to feel relief? And then how long does the relief last?
Sorry, could you repeat it first? Not the question.
Yeah, so will the patient, is it just symptom relief only, or is there actually a change in the underlying condition of the patient that would affect the long-term recovery of the patient?
Our main claim is that we are targeting dyspnea. However, in our literature search and talking to other clinicians, we have found specific pathways of the trigeminal nerve that can regulate autonomic response. That means that we can regulate also heart rate and many other conditions that can be related to autonomic response, but our focus is dyspnea.
And then once you begin using the product, how quickly does it provide benefit, and then how long does that benefit last?
Our claim also in this case is that it will be a use on demand. As soon as you start the stimulation, the current will start ramping up, and as soon as you reach that top level of stimulation, you will have an effect, a clinical effect. We are still working on defining what will be the time to effect. We are in our benchtop testing. We have been trying different parameters, and we have got some preliminary data for the autonomic response. Our proof of concept trial will give us better information to tell us after how long after reaching that top of stimulation the effect will be achieved. But it's a little bit soon to define that yet.
Some of the neurostim devices have found a conditioning response to this. You get X amount of effect for a week, and then 90%, then 80, then 50, etc. Do you have any research towards that and how to avoid it?
Yeah. Also, we have studied other devices that do trigeminal nerve stimulation. We have found other purposes such as migraine, ADHD, epilepsy, and we have seen that there is a difference depending on the condition. Because we are targeting, or we are trying to achieve an acute response, we expect that as soon as the patients start using the device, they will have an effect. And we also recently identified a paper in which they studied trigeminal nerve stimulation with cardiovascular response, and they also report similar effects. As soon as they achieve that top of that threshold of stimulation, they see an immediate response in the cardiovascular system.
Nice. So FDA recently approved a non-opioid pain reduction, right? And the number of drugs, I don't know the exact number, in phase 2, phase 3 to copy or mimic that is significant. Does that change your calculus at all?
Thank you for that question. I also want to clarify, we're not looking at pain reduction as much as breathlessness reduction. So any drugs that are looking at opioid pathways for pain relief, they would be looking at systemic sedation effects. That's not the pathway that we're aiming at. There are specific neural circuits that control airflow perception, breathlessness, limbic response, anxiety response. Those are pathways that are triggered by the nerve that we're stimulating, and as a result of that, it's very different from chronic pain management, so I don't think we're at risk with any of those drugs.
I like this, but several questions. This is an important area, and I'm surprised that you have such a low, small size market that you're projecting. Where is the disconnect?
Sure. So if we can go back to our market size, right? Our total market, we're looking at patients with severe dyspnea. So we're not, like Deborah pointed out, we're not addressing the underlying cause of the disease. We're focusing on symptom management at this end stage where they're maxed out on all medical management directed towards the lung, which
reduces the patient population within COPD that we can address. But one thing that we're looking at doing eventually is looking at dyspnea within heart failure, interstitial lung disease, pulmonary hypertension, and expanding that way. But within the COPD market, we have to focus on patients who need pure symptom relief and are maxed out on disease-directed care.
Perhaps you're charging too little.
Perhaps. Our margins are 87%.
Size in dollars, right? So that you are trying to address. How did you arrive at what you're, or how you're setting the ASP?
So, can we go to the second one, please? Yeah, so our price was informed by a few different things. We looked at comparable devices, like what Fernando mentioned, devices that stimulate nerves within the face for different symptom relief purposes, like migraine relief. They were priced into the $400 to $500 range. We also got a COGS analysis done by a manufacturer in Taiwan, which gave us a per unit cost of $62, and we're comfortably sitting with margins at 87%. The other thing that informed our pricing was the potential for savings, which is approximately $5,000 per patient. So we wanted to go 10. We wanted to have 10x savings compared to our price, and all of those things led us to a price of $500. But if you think we have room to increase, that's all it's going to use.
You know, there is no reason to tie the margin to the cost of goods. There's absolutely no reason to do that, and so you can, you should look at the value, what it's providing, and I would price it at $1,000 or more. I think you should take another look at that.
Thank you.
I agree. I wouldn't I also wouldn't look at a migraine device as your comparable, because the value creation with your device is, you have to look at the value creation and price it accordingly. So I want to clarify your technology a little bit. So it's a neurostim device. You said that the brain doesn't understand how much the lung can breathe, right? So are you resetting expectations with your device? Is that what you're doing?
Thank you. So in COPD patients and in general, dyspnea is triggered by three main mechanisms. Signals that come from the lung, they are called mechanoreceptors that basically sense how much the lung expands, and chemoreceptors that sense the levels of CO2, O2, and then the third one are the sensory pathways that we are targeting. What we are basically doing is that we are using the trigeminal nerve as a gateway to bypass the signals that come from the lungs and from the chemoreceptors. So we are modulating that response at the level of the medulla. That is where those signals are integrated and then sent to the brain.
Thank you. And I heard in some place in your presentation on the go-to-market strategy, you talked about this as short-term, so patients will be provided this device on a short-term basis. Why short-term?
Thank you for the question. I think in these first two phases, the reason we are exploring a rental model is just because of the economics of it, because patients are using their HSA funding and clinics need to earn a revenue in order to incentivize purchase. We're looking at the rental model, but in this stage, we'd be looking at one-time purchases where the patient just buys the device for long-term use.
But if I'm a patient with COPD, I don't know when I'm going to have an attack. So how do you manage the whole short-term thing? That I feel like I'm not fully understanding that.
Absolutely. I think for short-term use, we were envisioning when they anticipate that they will have dyspnea triggering activities. So for example, currently insurance reimburses pulmonary rehab for about 8 to 12 sessions. So if, for example, you're doing a 12-session pulmonary rehab course, you can rent the device so you can actually make it through and complete rehab. Most people don't complete rehab. and that's a critical step in conditioning their muscles, improving their ventilatory load. There's also an option for one-time purchase through the clinics. It's just something we weren't sure about the economics of yet, so we thought a rental is a safer model, but that's definitely something that we will look into further.
And you talked about patients going to the pulmonary clinics. Do you see patients rushing to the emergency room when they have an episode like this?
Yes, there are proportions of patients that go to ED and hospitalizations. We also have seen trends in patients that are on some of these high deductible healthcare plans, which is why it's part of our go-to-market strategy. Patients that are on those HDHPs tend to spend more on hospitalizations and ED visits. So that's part of the reason why we want to target them in our go-to-market strategy, as well as incorporate in some of these elements of being able to reduce ED visit utilization.
So, but when you first grew, you did not have ED as part of your model.
As ED visits being the metric of measurement, we are looking to target patients in settings of breathlessness clinics where they come in to get prescriptions, as well as sort of be a support with exertional dyspnea recovery, or being able to get through some of those exercises. And that's sort of where we are looking to target and come into the patient pathway, not as a piece that can be incorporated into EDs, but more of part of the patient's holistic, everyday, day-to-day living, because we're looking to do symptom management.
Guys, I thought this was really strong. I thought the slides were great. I love the breathing exercise to kick it off. Nice explanation of the problem and the solution, the mismatch between what's going on in the lungs and how the brain is perceiving it. So I think you're addressing a real problem with a novel approach, and I like the market size. So I think there's a lot here. Couple questions. First, another accolade. I love you talked to 50 customers. Tell me a little bit more what you heard from them, please.
I think...
when I say customers, I'm sorry, patients, thank you.
I think that the key insights were that they're not satisfied with current solutions, and it was actually a much more overwhelming number than we expected. They also quite viscerally actually described how it impacts their daily life and their ability to participate in activities. They described things like not being able to go on and walk around the block with their friend, and then not being able to participate in social activities because they feel breathless and they feel out of place. Aside from that, when we asked them about our different possible form factors, so patches on the face, some sort of eyewear, mask style thing, headband, a retainer, they seem very agnostic to the form factor. And I think that leads us to believe that they're really desperately waiting for a solution to this problem. The other thing is when we asked them about, specifically when we filtered patients who are maxed out on medical management, so they're taking all the inhalers and the biologics, and we asked them what they do when they're dyspneic. They primarily only described psychosocial interventions, breathing exercises, yoga, things to calm their anxiety that really helps them. So I think that led us to believe that we're on the right track, that there is a neural component to this that's not being addressed by current medication.
Yes. Okay. Couple more questions for you guys. You had mentioned there's 2 studies you're working on, I believe. The first was just on sort of general tolerability, I think, that sort of thing. What was the second one? Please remind me.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Actually, it's only one study, but we are studying 2 different cohorts. The first cohort is in healthy patients, and then the second cohort is in COPD patients. The reason behind this is that COPD is a very heterogeneous condition. So if we identify a signal in the COPD patients, we are not completely sure that that will apply to everyone. That's why we are doing a healthy subjects cohort, so to be sure that that signal is consistent.
Yeah, good. Okay. All right, just a couple more things here. Good job getting a patent going. I like that a lot. I thought the staged go-to-market pathway made a lot of sense, so I like the way you broke that down. One thing that I would be a little critical on, and I'm saying this because I really think this is a great project and worthwhile. I think if you really have a solution to a real problem of this magnitude, I think you're way under clubbing the raise that you should be working towards. I think you should be raising a lot more money. It's going to be worth it at the end if you get this right. And I think you're going to want to go a lot further, a lot faster, and not try to do this super duper skinny the whole way. I don't know, but it seems to me that this may be the most technically complex of the different things we've seen today. So I think it is going to take more cash than you're anticipating. There's lots of ways to get that, but I would just flag that one up front for you guys so you don't, just misstep.
I think, I know that wasn't a question, but I just want to clarify that for our clinical study and benchtop testing, we actually don't need a device. We can use off-the-shelf neuromodulation equipment, so it saves us a lot of upfront product development costs, and the MVP will be developed after we properly define stimulation parameters, placement, and all the design requirements in patients themselves. The other thing I wanted to mention is, I think this is something we were struggling with, we're engineers, not entrepreneurs, but we were wondering, we've been calculating this based on what we anticipate our costs will be. Do you think we should work backwards and look at what our valuation could be at each stage and go from there, or is there an alternative approach?
I would build it from the bottom up, not backwards like we're thinking, but I think this is good, but I would just triple or quintuple the expected expenses at each of these stages and just stomach the dilution if it hits, or finding grants. There's ways to deal with that. It's going to cost more than I think you've drawn up here, is my sense. And if you get it right at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. These are small dollars compared to where you can go. So.
Thank you. If possible, we'd love to connect offline and maybe workshop this a little bit if you'd be open to it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I completely agree with him. I did smile when I saw that side. You're not getting to market in 5 million. Also, you're very optimistic about when you get to market, especially if you have it in our work.
Have you applied to the Blueprint program? So focus purely on neurotech. This is one of the early centers. You should.
Is it Blueprint?
It's called Blueprint medtech.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Big one.
Obviously, big deal.
And it's awful.
Time for one last question.
Send me the business plan when it's done.
All right, last but not the least. Come on up.
Go for it.
Give it a few seconds.
Good evening. I'm Eleanor. I'm here with Haley, and we're representing Luminate Medical, where we're working towards bladder screening without the wait. Every year, more than 10 million people in the U.S. will experience hematuria, or blood in the urine, which is the leading symptom for bladder cancer. These patients are referred for a cystoscopy, which is a procedure where the bladder is directly visualized using a specialized scope, and this is performed by a urologist. But 63% of American counties have no practicing urologist. The demand for urological care is only increasing, but there's a growing provider shortage that the urological community is calling a present challenge and a future catastrophe. This is contributing to long wait times for an appointment and delays to care for patients. Only 30% of those 10 million indicated will actually get a cystoscopy, and 1 in 4 will wait longer than 2 months from first realizing something is wrong to getting their cystoscopy appointment. These delays have tangible impacts both for patients and for payers. Waiting just 3 months for screening decreases median survival by an entire year, and bladder cancer remains the most expensive cancer in per patient expenditure, with cost of treatment increasing exponentially as cancer is caught at later stages, and a total annual burden exceeding $6.5 billion. So how can we address this? At Luminate, we think that the key to enabling a paradigm shift in the way bladder cancer is screened for is utilizing a large and skilled workforce that is already present. 82% of urological practices employ advanced practice providers, which includes nurse practitioners and physician assistants. These providers are not currently performing screening cystoscopy, not because of the technical complexity of the procedure, but because of the diagnostic component. The urologist still needs to be the one to visually assess the patient's bladder and determine whether they need to come back for a biopsy. So our novel integrated solution decouples the collection of bladder images from their interpretation. So we enable non-urologist providers, like ABPs, to take images of the bladder. They're guided by real-time, AI-enabled feedback to ensure that the bladder is visualized completely and safely every time. And they then share those images with the urologist for asynchronous review, which they're able to complete in a fraction of the time they're spending in traditional cystoscopy appointments today. So we're improving efficiency while keeping that diagnosis and interpretation in the hands of the expert. So we're task-shifting screening, which is increasing practice capacity, decreasing those appointment wait times, and reducing the overall time to diagnosis for these patients. Luminate stands out from our competitors in several key ways. Firstly, by enabling those non-urologist providers to perform screening, we're increasing practice capacity and throughput, which allows practices to bring in more revenue and offer shorter wait times for an appointment. But we're also optimizing the use of the urologist's time, which is increasingly important as that workforce shortage grows. A urologist that today is spending 30 to 45 minutes in a cystoscopy appointment can now review that same patient's images in less than 5 minutes asynchronously. So that same urologist can now perform more surgeries in a week, so patients are also getting the treatment that they need faster. We've conducted customer discovery across the country, talking to urological providers at all levels to really validate this problem. We've heard again and again that patients are facing unacceptable wait times and that clinical outcomes are suffering as a result. Additionally, as we've been shaping our strategy over the course of this year, we've been in conversation with several key opinion leaders in the space. That includes the urologist-in-chief here at Hopkins, a former president of the Texas Urological Society representing the largest medical center in the world, and a former chair of the National Guidelines on Bladder Cancer. So targeting large academic medical centers first, we segment down a $2 billion total addressable market to just over $200 million, which accounts for the portion of annual cystoscopies that are performed at those ANCs. And we're doing more than just capturing this market, we're expanding it. By enabling more providers to perform screening, more patients will be able to receive it. Based on predicate devices, our 510K pathway will not require clinical data, so we expect to be on the path to clearance with benchtop data alone. Looking at implementation, we intend to start with a pilot here at Hopkins. We want to get this into the hands of our clinical partners who've been closely involved in the project since the beginning. They see a large patient population for cystoscopy every year, and they've already expressed interest in implementing our technology into their workflow. With that evidence, we plan to target other large academic medical centers as our beachhead customers. They see long wait times, and they have APPs available on staff to start doing this. Crucially, we can utilize an existing reimbursement structure for cystoscopy, which should accelerate the pathway to adoption.
So this represents a huge business opportunity. We can reasonably price our device at $200 with 70% margins, fitting into existing reimbursement systems. Our average customer will have around 2,000 cystoscopies annually, which means that at just 1% penetration, our annual revenue from hardware alone is almost $18 million. We will also likely net additional revenue from our AI-enabled software component. So why is this product relevant? With earlier detection, 5-year survival rates from bladder cancer skyrocket. So 98% of patients with early stage cancer will meet that 5-year mark, compared to only 9% of late-stage patients. Importantly, patients can expect a 50% reduction in out-of-pocket costs with this earlier detection. Earlier detection benefits payers as well, so there's a huge willingness to pay for this device because bladder cancer is so expensive to these insurance providers. With an annual cost burden of $6.5 billion, we can offer over $2 billion in cost savings. So by detecting this disease even one stage earlier, we can dramatically save on the downstream costs associated with lifelong surveillance and treatment. Task shifting is directly advantageous to urologists as well. So by enabling this task shift of this procedure, we can free up over 800 hours of urologist time per practice annually, and that does factor in the adequate time to review these new cystoscopy images. With this time, urologists can perform other higher margin, higher value procedures like actually resecting the bladder cancer tumors, netting over $185 million in physician fees purely from those new procedures. This is equally advantageous to hospitals and practices alike. So while NPs and PAs can perform and bill for these cystoscopies, our urologists can do these other higher margin procedures, bringing in over $1.5 million in facility fees to these practices. So as a company, we'll make money by selling directly to hospitals and practices with our hardware and software sales. It's important that we're in this really sweet spot, where once our device is approved, we can start making revenue immediately by tapping into these existing reimbursement codes. As we build this revenue and build clinical evidence, we'll have the option of expanding our reimbursement options by applying for a Category 3 CPT code. This code would reimburse for asynchronous review of these images, enabling us to take this device outside of urology offices down the line. So we've been working for the past year to de-risk our product, most recently with our participation in the Fuel Incubator program and with our upcoming pitch at the AUA Innovation Nexus. In the next 12 months, we're focusing on developing and manufacturing our integrated device for use in these usability and benchtop tests. By spring of next year, we hope to file our FDA pre-sub. We also have a plan looking further ahead for commercializing this device. So importantly, our 510K only requires benchtop testing, which means that our pilot studies will mainly be used to inspire clinical adoption. By fall 2029, we can expect to get our device in the hands of those who need it most. So we can learn from comparable exits in this field. Industry giants have a trend of acquiring these young companies like ourselves. So early stage startups get acquired with only 6 or very low 7-digit raises. Intersight was actually a university spin-out just like ourselves. We can also learn from the trends of mature startups. So the takeaway here is that these industry giants are willing to spend large sums to acquire innovative tech in our field. With this, we can estimate a $60 to $150 million exit. So why are we the team to get this done? In addition to our experience in engineering at the CBID program, we bring extensive experience in industry conducting medical device development, clinical research, and biotech investment. We're supported by a robust team of advisors, they're thought leaders in neurology, clinicians, founders, and reimbursement experts. We're also working closely with the Brady Urological Institute here at Hopkins to commercialize this device, and we want you to be a part of it too. We are asking for $400,000 in safe notes to execute our 18-month plan, which entails the following. The bulk of our funds will go toward the development of our AI software component, for which we'll need to bring in experts. We'll also need to develop a small fleet of integrated devices for this benchtop testing. The remaining funds will go toward IP filing, our formal FTO analysis, and our regulatory strategy. So with this, we're asking for $400,000 in safe notes, with a $6 million valuation cap and a 20% discount. This means that at acquisition, you would get almost 7% of equity in Luminate. So with your investment today, we could hope to deliver you a 10 to 25x return on your money. With that, I want to thank you all for your attention, and I'd love to welcome up the rest of the team for questions.
Good presentation, thank you. Changing practice of medicine. Will these nurse practitioners and others, they'll be doing the imaging. Would they require any decertification or training? They would, right? So have you factored that into your plan?
Yes, so the ability to perform cystoscopy is usually per institution, so they're credentialed per institution, but APPs are considered qualified healthcare professionals, and so they are able to perform this procedure. Oftentimes they can use the same similar sort of tool to do a non-diagnostic procedure inside the bladder, and so we are expecting that they have the technical capability and the know-how to use this new device. And there should not be issues with adoption specifically for APPs at all.
I'm trying to understand. So you're basically helping existing technologies work faster, or right? Is that a fair assumption? Because you're taking away the physician load, and so things can move faster. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes. So we're creating a novel device that is specifically designed for the use for an APP. So it's supposed to be a de-skilled version of the device that does not require as much training and technical expertise as a urologist would require to use it. And so that would enable them to safely and effectively image the bladder and then send those images high quality at diagnostic grade to a urologist for review.
Okay. So in your slides, you talked about early detection. How does your device enable early detection?
Because there's more APP, because the enabling APPs to this procedure increases the number of providers that are able to do screening by 5,000. This will enable much faster, this will enable many more providers to be able to do the procedure and increase practice throughput. So by getting them in faster to the practice, by adopting our device, this will enable them to be diagnosed faster.
Is that the reason why they're not getting diagnosed? Is the bottleneck the provider for diagnosis?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of recent urology literature that shows that the providers are the absolute bottleneck of procedures in urology. And cystoscopy, being the first line screening procedure, is the most critical procedure.
Okay. I have one more question. Sorry. What's the typical age group of the patients?
Older patients, typically older men around about the age of 70, I would say is typical age, but wide range of ages.
I'd like to ask a question about your regulatory approach. So you're going to FDA with no clinical studies. I'm assuming you're going to somehow use simulated scans or some sort of prior scans that have happened, and you're going to put them in front of these new, or how are you going to do that? Tell me about that, because to me, one of the biggest concerns, the economics of what you're doing are very pure. Let me start by saying that, right? Everybody working at the top of their licensing is the absolute right answer to the whole system, but the devil's in the details. So my question is, it's very critical that if these APPs are now working at a new level, that the clinical quality of the scans that they can deliver are actually what the doctor needs to make these diagnoses accurately. So I'm trying to understand how you're going to get that data and prove to the FDA that these new providers can do this without running a clinical study. But I believe there is a path. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so we're going to start with benchtop models and hydrogel bladders. So we're currently working on a usability study for that, and we're also working closely with some clinicians from Johns Hopkins Hospital right now on, as you were saying, getting high quality bladder scan images of tumors and annotating them and making sure that our AI model is sort of corresponds with a clinician's markings of it. Does that answer your question? One thing I also want to note is that while we can't disclose too much about the technical aspects of our product today, a key part of this product, a key technical novelty, is that we are ensuring that these images will be of diagnostic quality, will visualize the entire bladder. Like, that is implicit in our product, and that's what makes it novel and accessible for these providers. So that's a really important part of our product that we weren't able to touch on too much today.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the confidence in that assumption. We can go forward. So who's going to own the medical legal liability of this scan, right? Because it's currently owned by the doctor. If the scan is bad, the doctor's on the hook. If now you're splitting that off, how does that divvy up? And also the revenue, right? Is the NP or APP getting the revenue, or is the doc? And I understand there's a longer term CPT 3 code idea, which we can talk about offline, but just
as you go to market early stage, what's that look like?
Yeah, I can touch upon the liability, the first part of your question. So because we're separating the image acquisition from the actual diagnostic, the liability will still fall on the urologist, because the urologist is the one looking at the images and making the final call. So, sorry, could you repeat the second part of your question?
It was, so legal liability is the first part. The second part is the revenue. Does the revenue go to the APP, or does the revenue for the scan go to the doc?
Yeah, so those revenue calculations we put up there, one important distinction about those is the added value we're saying, that's ignoring the current value that we'd still be providing with cystoscopies. So all that money we showed you is in those new procedures by freeing up urologist time. With our cystoscopies that we have the current workload of, the NPs and PAs can bill them, so the facility fees still go to those practices. The physician fees will be distributed as such depending on practice agreements. It varies depending on the hospital and setting, but everything is still happening under the same facility, so there shouldn't generally be concerns about like losing out on any chunk of the pie. It's all happening under the same roof still.
And what have the urologists you've talked to about this said?
Frankly, they tend to love it because oftentimes they don't want to do these procedures as much as they have to do them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big issue for them, especially at settings like Hopkins, where they have such a backlog of these more complex and really pressing procedures. Cystoscopy in general is a really low margin procedure for them. So they'll spend a day a week doing only cystos, and to them, they're making a fraction of the money that they could spend, that they could earn doing these more complex procedures, and have more clinical impact doing the other ones. So they love this, at least at settings like Hopkins and the big settings.
A couple of follow-ups. I lost one, how would adoption work, right? So I'm thinking urologists they already have a device in place. Now you're asking them to buy a second device. So what happens to the existing device that they've already invested in? How would you convince them to adopt your device, not from, oh, it will free up your time, but from a financial perspective?
Yeah, from your point of there is already an existing device, cystoscopies are the gold standard for not only just initial bladder cancer screening, but for a lot of later stage procedures, so resection of tumors, placing stent, and any other interventions. So those will still be there. So our device is not intended for later stage, incredibly serious patients or anything like resections or interventions. So we will still need cystoscopies for those procedures. Our device is just going to sort of fit into that first line screening.
And then you talked quite a bit about exit. I might have missed this. How much money will you have to raise to get to market?
We can move back to that slide. Okay, so to get to market just purely through like an FDA 510K regulatory pathway, we only anticipate needing this 400,000 and perhaps a little bit more in non-dilutive funding to be able to get to market, because it only takes benchtop testing. But to inform clinical adoption, we want to do a pilot study that shows the efficacy of our device to inform actual adoption from large academic medical centers that are not Hopkins. So as we're working closely with large academic centers around here, we expect them to adopt this device as they're working closely with us. But to get widespread adoption, we want to do a clinical trial after clearance.
So we see a seed round falling around the V&V testing and a Series A around the pilot study, just to give you a visual benchmark.
And how much would that be?
So with this 400, we're going to try and carry it along, string it along further with non-dilutive funding from the state government, if that comes back into play for us. Our seed might be a couple million, and then potentially for the pilot, especially because we need to manufacture a larger scale of devices as they are disposable, that would be in the upper millions then.
A couple comments. First, we live in the luxury of first world healthcare, right? And you have the device you mentioned, rural populations in how many counties, an astounding number, 60-some%. But that's also an international problem, right? Second world, third world healthcare, and you have a solution there that's pretty huge. And with that, taps into gigantic potential sources of non-dilutive funding. So you should check that. This is not just every single last, maybe. All right. So I think that Howard was getting at this, maybe have an IDE plan in your back pocket. I've seen many, many devices plan on bench testing data only and doesn't quite get there. But what keeps Boston from just adding a machine learning AI layer on top of all their market penetration and doing the same?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we've thought about as well. So what is changing that is actually making sure that because you're saying we're on top of an existing cystoscope, right? So the problem is when you're using an existing cystoscope and you're having APP do it, you have to make sure that you're visualizing the entire bladder. And APP is not trained to visualize the entire bladder. In fact, that's what urologists spend all the time perfecting. It's actually visualizing everything and making sure that they have left no spot on visuals. So that is the critical part of the device, I guess.
Which we're not talking about. So the data is likely long-term more valuable than the device, right? So it seems like you have a similar challenge that digital pathology had, right, on the market, and that was Mount Everest for digital pathology. They did it, but it took crazy big data for them to convince the medical community that the machine was good as the doctor's eyes. Think that through. How to win that convincing battle.
We still want to keep urologists in the loop as much as possible, so we're working with them to make sure that they feel comfortable as possible, that they're in the loop and we're not taking it out of the diagnosis out of their hands.
And is that the long-term plan, or is that just that?
Yeah, so that's definitely our current plan. As we were just mentioning, that as we build a data set of all these bladder images, that ideally will have urologist annotations on them with the key anatomical findings that they have. We're hoping to retain those images and then ideally in the future start training a big data model on all of these images that we're collecting to create some sort of AI program that can detect lesions, as quick as the urologist and not better. Yeah, so but currently going to market, we do not want to take the liability of saying whether this is cancerous or not, and so we're purely playing as an issue.
So that's the long-term plan. I can really with that strategy. All right, and tell me about expansion. The expansion to other condition specialties.
Yeah, so as for expansion, when we talk about this slide right here, we hope to gather enough evidence to apply for 2 new Category 3 CPT codes, one for the asynchronous review and one that covers the portion of the device that will be the person placing the device and the cost of the device itself. So we hope to gather enough evidence in the coming years to actually apply for those 2 new codes.
Your data will be better than what the machine will do, right? So there's a lot of thought players that don't hear that, but it's already been done with lower GI detection. So about, I don't know, not a lot, 10,000 videos for machines to equal an average gastroenterologist, and then about 100,000 no comment. Cool.
Fantastic presentations. We will now take a 10-minute break, then come back for our keynote talk and then awards. Okay? So 10 minutes, no more. We're reconvening at 5:35. 5:35. Only 5 minutes behind schedule. You can use the room there if you like to discuss strategy. And awards are after meetings. And also discuss with your investment is your own. Right? We've had judges who are very dynamic with opposition. That's also a good lesson for the team. So Most of them get an additional year as a second year of the program. So all the fellows, the PhDs, they're all spinning out the company. So in year 2, like, cool, thank you. We have like a select fellowship box where those who have gone on
Keep on it for so long. Nice.
Yes. I'm not fine. We've had several projects in the universal space in the past. We have a global health astronaut program as well. Our working on 4 global health projects as well. They'll present on Friday at School of Public Health. So if you would like to welcome your IPOs, that's awesome. Friday at School of Public Health. Ask one of us. I offered that to them. After that, so Aditya, on Friday for the global health presentations, if any external folks want to join, do we have ideas?
So they were saying this was
So were there a share this was a non-conventional presentation. As you notice, they're not talking about technology, that's not public. But on Friday, they will talk about what is the thing? 4 other projects. But none of them are, I would say, none of them are necessarily in the university this year. 2 are in malaria, tuberculosis, and 1 is breast cancer. So 1 is based in Uganda and Kenya. The other is tuberculosis in India. Malaria is kind of Uganda, Cameroon, Zambia. Teams travel, I travel to them. So I'm going back to Zambia. We've done projects in Ethiopia.
So, we can talk about it all. It's all good. Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, check out our website. Once the students spin out companies or non-profits, we've had 3 non-profits. They should please do Google Center for Bioengineering and Design, Johns Hopkins, and behind us. We work very closely with IPO and Lardel Global Health once upon a time. Lardel Global Health. So the penguin resuscitator, the suction, penguin suction resuscitator, ammonite, those students actually helped in some of the creative process with the Lardel. So we had those. More recently, we had a project called NEMO in Uganda, where we were task shifting severe neonatal illness detection in the first 7 days of life, so that IMNCI 7 major science attempting to task shift those to mothers in the homes. We have this thing called the well baby visit in the first 7 days, which might be 75% of the burden of neonatal mortality is in the first 7 days of life, first week of life, for which almost all African countries, Asian countries, they have this community health worker-based protocols. CHWs, PhDs visit the home of the neonatals from the first day 0 to day 7 to check these 7 days. Very simple, really simple. But they, so hypothermia, respiratory rate above the so there's qualitative qualitative and quantitative science, so breastfeeding, hallucinogens, convulsion, etc. The problem is well baby visits don't happen too often. CHWs are not coming to the home in 7 days, and even if they are, they're able to actually accurately assess the objective science and so on. Even if they don't have a thermometer, counting respiratory. So we built a simple, very inexpensive device called NEMO, or neonatal monitor NEMO. It's a simple band that you put on the baby twice a day, and it automatically measures the quantitative daily signs, and it was either an interactive IVR-based system or a low-cost smartphone that the DHT gives out to the family for the first 7 days. They should walk through the quantitative data. So they can answer like yes, list lessons, from videos. So this was called NEMO. We were one of the, we got some money from DH with a grant challenge for we did two kind of acceptability studies and feasibility studies. And the protocol was that mothers would be recruited at a district hospital on the day of birth with their local VHT. And the VHT would train the mother in the use of the device. And the device would follow the mother back to the home. And then she was required to use it once a day, not twice a day. Yeah. It draws its power when it's plugged in. So we did this, and then it was a small figure. 20 babies, 20 mothers were recruited. And I'll send you links to the papers. And 2 babies, the device triggers an alert if anything is wrong. So 2 babies triggered an alert. And the protocol was that if it triggers an alert, you call your VHT and the VHT checks it out and then you bring them, you have a care seeking behavior trigger. So 2 babies were brought back to the Iganga district hospital. And the doctor on call examined the baby, said the baby was showing early signs of sepsis. And the mother and the VHT had no idea anything was wrong with the child, except that the device was screaming, right? So that's just an example of the type of stuff. So this was a extreme task shifting, very provocative hypothesis. You task shift from the VHT to the mother, because the mother is very invested in the care of her neonatal. That's one example. We've done stuff on neonatal jaundice, like simplifying detection of it. The resuscitator. We had also on the training side, midwifery training, so like birthing simulators, neonatal resuscitation. We've done stuff with neonatal resuscitation, where helping the provider home birth or accessory birth quickly leverage that golden minute, 60 seconds to detect, not just identify that the baby is in a shift, but also the appropriate head angle for resuscitation. So there was a mat cartoons made, simple roll-on mat. So you place the baby, there's a nape angle, so the head is at an angle where the airway is open. Oftentimes they don't remember at which rate to do it, so it had that little metronome. Simple enough exercise. But no, regrettably, other than the things that Lardell has taken to market with us, right? There's the Moyo monitor, which is more the intrauterine fetal heart rate monitor. Other than that one, none of these have actually made it. I would say this is primarily an educational program. About 20 to 30% of these actually become like startups and become tinkerers and creative people. Thank you for coming. How did you find out about this event?
welcome. Well, if your bandwidth permits, come on Friday. They will talk about the technology. None of these are new, but you'll get a sense of like the program. And then we always have an appetite for working with practitioners and foundations like yours to start working together on a problem. This is how all our global health projects are. Typically, the large organization understands the problem in the field, like the Fiber or others. They'll come up with, here's some big problems they would like to work on. Then it starts the students actually doing a field learning in a couple of weeks. Interact with stakeholders, needs finding, needs assessment. They're very creative. We follow very rigorous design engineering methodology. So they come up with different prototypes, different ideas, hundreds of different ideas, filter them down through a lot of iterative feedback. We hit them very hard on the engineering side, so they actually have to build stuff and not just talk. This one is more about talk, this today's presentation, but it actually requires pretty hardcore prototype building and stuff. No, these are masters, graduate students. They're all masters. They all have engineering degree or medical degrees. One of them is a doctor, one was a medical student. The rest are all undergrads with engineering degrees. Malaria program. We are detecting Anopheles stevens eye. We have an AI-enabled tool that automates the identification of mosquito species. So vector surveillance is a very important critical element of malaria, and vector surveillance is severely constrained by just a handful of entomologists in the country who peer through microscope and identify the thousands and thousands of collected specimens. Yeah, so there's about 70 Anopheles species that carry malaria. Of the 460 Anopheles species, and each one of them have very different behaviors, host-seeking behaviors, insecticide resistance profiles, time of flight. So the interventions have to be targeted effectively, as well as population density, diversity, how to change in response to intervention. This is well recognized. That's why every country in Africa, Southeast everywhere, they have vector surveillance programs, except they are very, very sparse and very resource and expensive. So we built the world's first AI-enabled virtual entomology study population called vector. So now we just concluded a randomized controlled trial in Uganda, where 24 community health workers engaged in this course. Over a 1 year period, identified 73,000 mosquitoes routine tracking mechanism. And they identified it with an accuracy, speed, and throughput that far exceeded that of any entomologist. That was the control. And now we're identify the mosquito species, sex, abdomen, and report it to the national database. We're monitoring the time to reporting how interventions are changing as a result. And now we're doing a national scale-up in Uganda. We're now integrating with the national liaison program in Uganda. It's going to be approved. We're working with CBID University and so Ethiopia might be very helpful in this project that starts.
Where are the sources of funding out there for working on that?
Gates right now. Malaria project is completely funded by Gates. We had some USAID funding that went away. I was about to get $500,000 USAID funding. It was like all done, dude. Verbally handshaken with the program officer. Agency was gone, she was gone, money was gone. I was like, thank you. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Please take your seats. We'll start off with the keynote talk. So attendees, please take your seats. Okay, so wasn't that amazing? So I got one of the notes with
admit that the class this year did a much, much better job than they did last year. So congratulations. It's hard to get that out of those guys. Yeah. Congratulations. All the teams did amazingly well. The questions, thank you so much to all the judges. More on that later. Now I have a distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Mir Imran. Mir is one of the most prolific and successful medical device innovators ever. Mir's innovations have led to over 20 companies, 15 already acquired, from ICDs developed in part here at Hopkins, through to his newest company, Rani Pharmaceuticals, which is a robo-pill, the most amazing technology. Mir's work has, according to ChatGPT 5.2, and it took it like 30 seconds to figure this out. It took a lot of analysis. Has generated over $70 billion in revenue potentially once the pharmaceutical one also comes out, and impacted the lives of over 30 million patients. But the amazing thing about Mir is that this success has not prevented him from spending time with people like you and me, educators and students. And Mir has been heavily involved in the Stanford Biodesign program, and he has been mentoring kids here at the CBID program at Hopkins and other universities, including his alma mater at Rutgers and others. So I think that's a sign that Mir is in this for the societal impact. The impact that his ideas and his innovations are having on the world, and the impact that you all, the students that he is mentoring, have on the world. So I think there's no better tribute than that. So with that, I'd like to pass the baton pass the mic to Mir Imran. And thank you again so much for coming out from California to spend a couple of days with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf, and Aditya, thank you very much for hosting me. I'm going to talk about my journey, but I thought I'd start with my failures. Most people start with, successes, but so I'm going to start with failures. A few words about how to manage failure. And when you have so many failures, you learn how to manage it. Took me a while. So that's my failures, starting from 1974 to 76. 2 companies that I did while I was a student at Rutgers. I had no business starting those, and they both failed, one after another. I'll tell you very briefly, the first one I started because in the old days, we used to get a credit card when you joined the university, and with that came 3 or 4 checks, blank checks. And I was a student who was broke all the time, and I saw that. I said, oh my God, God sent this investment into my first company. So I started a company, and I did all the work myself, library and all that. And within a year, I spent it all, and I couldn't pay it back. So I went on a payment plan with the card company. I shut down the company. A little while later, a friend of mine said, you really did it wrong. You really needed to have at least half a dozen credit cards. So, and what the heck did I know? So we both applied for credit cards, and we had 3 or 4 credit cards each. And the goal was to spend the money from 3 credit cards and then use the others to pay the first one, Ponzi scheme. And so that didn't work, and we both went on a payment plan after that. So I don't recommend that. So moving forward, Surface Genesis was a company that was biomaterials. At the peak of .com, I said, I gotta have my own .com. That was a mistake. And I started that literally 4 months before the market crash. So I spent the rest of the time laying people off and returning the remaining money back to the investors. Intrapace was an obesity company, and it really went pretty far. And that's the one company I felt pretty sad about. And Priya Medical was a women's health company, and nobody wanted to invest in that. So I invested, but that's it. So, and there was a company called Intella, which I put it here as a failure, but I also have it listed in my successes because I was able to pivot and change the products and ended up selling the company to a Japanese company, but I should never have started that company. It was really gave me a lot of headaches, but made money for the investors finally. So you know Kenny Rogers' song? You got to know when to hold them. This was the one I was really sad about. And this company, we actually developed a gastric stimulator, and it resulted in 20% body weight loss in less than a year. Published on that, we got it approved in Europe, and after that, we couldn't raise money because 2008, the Lehman crash happened, and everything disappeared. So, and the next one, Surface Genesis, biomaterials company. I should never have started this. The licensing model for medical, in the medical device space, trying to license biomaterials, no medical device company wants to pay a license, a royalty or license fee. So I shut it down and moved the IP into InCube Labs, my research company. And the last one was the B2B company that wrong timing, and there was no reason to do it. I just did it because everyone was doing it. So that's the story. I said, when you have failures, you have to manage them. Manage the failures. You have a lot of stakeholders who have lost money, and you have to deal with them professionally, with transparency and with ethics. So bad news should be shared immediately. Investor communications becomes important. Legal has to be with you, legal and accounting. Take care of, if you have any employees left, take care of them. Deal with creditors who are not likely to get paid. And then deal with the landlord and other issues. IRS, you have to make sure that you shut the company down and properly so people can take a write-off. And monetize whatever you can. So these are just a few bullet points, but the list is much longer, and you really have to take care of your. So here is the rest of the story. So the failures are still listed there. And so I'll just walk you through how to read this. My first company, InTech, where we developed ICD, was acquired by Eli Lilly, and Lilly spun out Guidance. Some of you may be old enough to remember that. And then that got acquired by defibrillator company. I got sued, the company got sued. Lilly was very unhappy, and but the company went on to be successful. Each one, so the next one I did, how many of you have purchased homes recently? You know, there's a lockbox that hangs on the door, that realtor hangs. And I got robbed by a realtor when I was selling my home in Pittsburgh, moving to California, and he or she stole my best stereo system. And so I was quite pissed off, and then I thought about it, and I said, well, better to solve the problem and make some money there. And I did, and no FDA, so start to finish was very quick, and so on. So all these different companies, they're in interventional cardiology, depth of anesthesia, cardiac electrophysiology, urology, enlarged prostate, BPH therapy, several in cardiology, and focus was dealing with hemorrhagic stroke. That company was acquired by Covidian, which then got acquired by MDD. So Nare was an ultrasound imaging company, sold that to a Chinese medtech company. SafeView was another security company, I'll show you. And spinal modulation was a very exciting company where we came up with a novel target for chronic pain. And this is the one that was able to, we were able to, or we discovered that the stimulation of the feet in diabetic foot ulcers really had a magical effect and reversed the neuropathy. And the other three companies I'll talk about here. I'll quickly scroll through it. The first implantable defibrillator, the one on the left is the size, they both are about the size of the cigarette pack. And the one on the left used to be at the Smithsonian, I don't know if it's still there. And the lockbox I talked about, depth of anesthesia, we also had a brain mapping system. And Hospira bought the company. And the depth of anesthesia is used by anesthesiologists so that they don't under-medicate the patient so the patient is paralyzed but can feel all the pain, which is really bad, and then or over-medicate and can bring them back from back to life. Cardiac Pathways is another important company, mapping and ablation for the treatment of ablation in the cardiac area for ventricular and atrial arrhythmias. Boston bought that. After 35 years, they're still marketing those catheters. Enlarged prostate, used RF ablation, and Medtronic is the proud owner. This was another thing that as I was thinking about stenting and whatnot, I realized that when the stent expands, it probably releases embolic particles. And I went to I went to Tom Fogarty first. Was a good friend of mine. He just recently passed away. And I said, Tom, this is what I want to do. He said, you've been smoking funny cigarettes again. And he said, this is not a problem. And then I went to another famous cardiologist, Steve Osterly. He said, this doesn't happen in my practice. It happens at the VA hospital or places like that. But I did this anyway. I went to two of the venture capitalists. They said, okay, in spite of the negative feedback, we'll invest. And it has become standard in certain high-risk interventions, and Medtronic is monitoring that. Ultrasound imaging, novel mathematics behind the image computation, which results in really good, high-quality images. You might have gone through these machines at airports, where you raise your hand and it scans you. So I started work on it after 9/11. And again, no FDA, so 3.5 years from start to finish. And LC, which is a defense contractor, came and acquired it. This was an important company, hemorrhagic stroke, aneurysm repair. And left in the right panel there, you see the aneurysm. Within 30 minutes, what you see there, completely blocked. And they're studying quite a few right now. This was a very exciting chronic pain management company. Rani Therapeutics was a very novel company where, biologics have become a big deal. There are probably 70, 80 different biologics that have been approved. They're all injectable, and most of them are. And so everybody was thinking about how do we convert them into pills. And so I came up with a way to do that. And let's see if I can play this. I have a short video to show you the technology. Get a kick out.
Rani Therapeutics, an InCube Labs company, has created a novel approach for the delivery of biologics. In this video, we will demonstrate how the Rani pill oral delivery platform works. Here you see a patient swallowing what appears to be a standard capsule. The capsule has a special enteric coating that protects it from the acidic environment in the stomach. When the capsule encounters the higher pH levels found in the small intestine, the enteric coating and outer shell of the capsule dissolve, exposing the delivery mechanism to intestinal fluid. The mechanism has a self-inflating balloon that contains two reactants separated by a dissolvable valve. Exposure to intestinal fluid dissolves the valve, allowing the reactants to mix, creating carbon dioxide. This inflates the balloon and creates the pressure needed to inject a dissolvable microneedle containing the drug or sensor into the intestinal wall. The intestinal injection is pain-free, as the intestines have no sharp pain receptors. The balloon.
So the balloon passes out, and so this took me 10, 12 years to. He's 12 years old. Yeah. Sorry. The company is 12 years old, and we have finally partnered with the division of Roche for a hemophilia drug to be delivered orally. And now we're having conversations with a number of pharma companies. They want to put their biologics on a platform. This was one of the hardest things I did from a technical standpoint. And Alpha Therapeutics is a new company, still in stealth mode, and it's treating type 2 diabetes and obesity, and you'll hear more about it in the coming years. And direct delivery of drugs, biologics to the brain. This is also a young company. So that's it. That's all I have. Just a quick run through. A lot of hard work and heartache. So I'm open to questions. Yes.
So, Mir, can you walk through how you go about identifying a problem? Because again, that's something that the teams here are very particular and what's the process. Can you share your process?
Identification of problem.
Yes.
So in each case, there's a story. You know, like the lockbox where I got robbed. In the case of body scanners, 9/11 triggered me to do that. This I have been working on it for a number of years. There was a breakthrough a couple of years ago. I had identified, you know, the blood-brain barrier is a huge problem in getting the drug into the brain. And especially with the biologics, that becomes a huge problem. And so this is, this should have approval, either believe it or not, it's a 510K. It's a fully implanted system. And Alva, I talked about, you know, Rani, this thought came after a lunch I had with the CEO of United, who had come to visit me, and I asked him what brought him to California. And he said, we had invested a couple $100 million in a company who claimed they could convert this peptide that they had into a pill. He said, we had very little expectation, low expectation of that. So I came here to shut down the company, have the last board dinner. I left that meeting thinking about, you know, I had never thought of it, but I realized that that's a serious problem. And so this was started. Spinal modulation, chronic pain. I, you know, reading articles after articles on the existing pain therapies, spinal cord stimulators, very, the efficacy rate was about 50%. Large number of patients just didn't respond to it. And now, so I went after a different nerve called the dorsal root ganglia that there are at least 15% common. And that really worked. The quality of pain relief was amazing. And I've already talked about this. You know, this was a friend of mine had a hemorrhagic stroke, and I watched his therapy. You know, they used to fill coils, tiny coils in the aneurysm sac, and those coils would not completely coagulate. So they had to go back and put more coils 6 months later. So this was a simple device placed in, and it immediately sealed it. This I talked about. Sonare, I don't know why I did that. Forgotten. But it was, I had come up with some new mathematical construct to build the image. Perky search, it was just a thought experiment that led to that. You know, this was in medical school. I learned about a procedure called TURP, and this is a nasty procedure where you have a stainless steel straw with a sharp edge, and you ream the urethra, and the poor patient is peeing blood for weeks, and serious adverse events after that permanently. So this was more done in self-preservation than anything else. So this had, I apologize if that the image bothered anybody, any of the men up here. So cardiac pathways is the curative treatment ventricular arrhythmias that I developed the plans to convert these the aberrant arrhythmias. And here, in this case, we could actually go in and cure the tachyarrhythmia. Here, a friend of mine, after a procedure, had come out of it with some brain deficit because the anesthesia had gone wrong, and he was he had brain deficit, and he also had a lot of pain during the surgical procedure. Robbed, and then this was a collaboration with the main cardiologist from Johns Hopkins. His best friend had died sudden cardiac death, and there was no one to resuscitate him. So I met him, and he wanted to do a wearable vest later, and our conversation led to doing an implantable. The technology was not there. The capacitor technology wasn't there. The battery technology was there. So I had to develop a number of these things. So that gives you a pretty cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So you obviously starting in companies. I wanted to ask what's the main motivation behind it?
It has never been money. I don't really care about money. I have a pretty simple lifestyle and drive a pickup truck and no fancy cars. It's just, the impact you can make on people's lives. Yes.
A lot of people have ideas, but very few people have been able to get so many acquisitions. Is it because the first acquisition succeeded that they kept coming back?
The companies don't care how many acquisitions you've had. They don't really care. So you have to be solving a problem that they really want to buy. And I don't go out and sell. I don't sell to medtech companies. But when you go to sell something, it becomes a fire sale. It's not. It's never a good outcome. So in most of those companies, almost all of them, they came to buy it. So because I'm happy to continue to build them. And for example, the ultrasound imaging company, we took it to more than 100 million annual revenue, and a few other companies took to 10, 20, $30 million. And then, one of the things you notice that I've built companies in areas that no one had touched. And so for the large medtech companies, they see that not as competitive, but accretive or expanding the market.
So you've got your companies to revenues.
Many of them.
You were in revenue stage, and then they said, okay, yeah, we need to.
Some of them were, for example, the neurovascular company. We were in the midst of a clinical trial. We've done 26 patients, and one of the neurosurgeons who was PI, he spilled the beans to a Covidian rep saying, hey, this is an amazing technology. always willing to listen. Yeah.
What is advice you have for young entrepreneurs, given everything you've learned from our
Just one advice. Pick the problem you want to solve carefully. Go after the big unsolved problems, not in incremental innovation, because you'll find incremental innovations happen in a crowded space where there are so many other people. You have small incremental improvements, patient outcomes. Some of them have a big impact, but the vast majority of them. And it's a crowded IP space. It's hard to sell those companies.
Is there been a time where the device that you've made or a trial that you've conducted has resulted in harm, and how do you process that when you're in a position where you're trying to build something?
Yeah, the first, sometimes, not to harm the patient, very careful, especially when you're dealing with implantable devices and very brittle patients. The first IDE that was approved for the defibrillator, the FDA was quite worried that would happen. These patients had a high likelihood of going into sudden cardiac death, and that's why they were selected. But so we had them being monitored 24/7, order monitored. They had arrhythmia episodes frequently, and first all I got was one of the patients had an arrhythmia, fell down, non-responsive. The device didn't do anything for 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. It's an eternity when you only have 4 minutes left before brain damage. So luckily, after that, it actually detected and brought them back. So none of the patients died, but what intrigued me, and we had them all hooked up to reporters, video reporters. So we knew, so we went and looked at that. We had this fast fibrillation, tachycardia, high rate tachycardia, which didn't get detected until it degenerated into VF. And the device I had designed was, detection scheme was to detect VF, not VT. So we stopped the trials at that point and went back to the drawing board, added another electrode, patient type electrode, to measure the arrhythmia and the rhythm and be able to count the beats per minute accurately. And then we went back into the clinic, and that's the one that got approved. So yeah, you have to be super careful and do a lot of testing. So most of the other things were not where the patient's life didn't depend on it. But in some cases it did, the neurovascular aneurysm was potentially lethal. So pick your problems carefully. Go after the biggest problem. So every one of these things I've done, a priori when I started to work on that, I had no understanding of that area. None, zero. I just researched and defined the problem, understood it, redefined it, refined it, until you had a really deep understanding. And when you get to that understanding of the solution, you think of it, you don't actually have to solve it. Yeah.
30 or 40 years of your medtech entrepreneurship?
47 years.
47. How have you seen the medtech innovation ecosystem evolve in terms of picking the problems?
It's harder to pick a problem that hasn't been solved, but there are still problems there. I mean, the fact that I'm still starting companies shows that. So you still have, it is harder. The regulatory path is also more difficult. FDA was very young. When I started, FDA had started regulating just two and a half years prior, regulating devices just 2 years prior to when I started. So, a different world. Yes?
So you started a lot of companies, you probably worked with a lot of different people. Can you speak about like how to build a team, bring on the right people, and kind of create that environment?
Bring people then who are smarter than you. That makes your life much better. And you know, it's a challenge. You have to bring the best people. You have to make sure you're building a culture of collaboration and focus on solving the problem. So you have to be very careful when you do that. And you'll make mistakes, but you have to solve those mistakes as quickly as you can. There is toxic employee that can really damage the whole organization. Yeah.
You said there were a number of businesses that you had no business starting. Where in the development process were you able to discern that, and what do you think was the differentiating factor between those that?
Some of them were very obvious, you know, starting at .com, and then the market crashes. I had no choice. I got shut down. So the Jensen Bioengineering company, after I started that, I realized that the business model was not going to work. I didn't wait for it to not work. But a year into it, I decided to shut it down. Interface was that was very sad. The market crash of Lehman Brothers failure, that killed it. And Rhea Medical, women's health company, nobody wanted to invest. You know, it's really hard to get women's health companies started. Probably because most of the VCs are men. No, I mean, I'm serious. That's probably the reason. There's no, I don't see any other reason. I've got 4 daughters. Yes.
I was wondering if you were given $2 million right now, what kind of company you do? What kind of companies would you invest in? If you were given some $1 million right now to invest, what kind of company or what would you do?
Problems, big problems that you need solutions. And look, I hate competition. I don't want to build companies where there is competition. That's why you have one of those things, competition and whatnot. I don't like it. So I look for problems that have not been solved. The advantage of doing that is the IP landscape is key. The Rani Therapeutics capsule robotic pill, and I filed several cases. The patent office came back a few months later and said, can you please provide some prior art references? So, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So can you please provide prior art references? They couldn't find any prior art. And so you know, usually it's such a big open area, you can get about very strong patents.
So
start receiving funding from like a VC firm or external sources, how does that change and shape or influence your values as a recipient of that?
Yeah. So in the 80s and 90s, most of the VCs were operators. They had operating experience, they ran companies, and then became VCs. And then in the 2000, a lot of the analysts and from Wall Street started becoming VCs, and they didn't have a clear. They didn't know how to analyze it other than financials. I mean, whenever one metric I had, if a VC asked me to provide 5-year pro forma revenue model, I never went back to them. At least not for the first round of funding. There you are. Speak up.
You see I like to sit in the middle, so you can't ignore me. Chris O'Donnell, Eris Newborn Care. We work on improving newborn care in Ethiopia. Just started up.
Wonderful.
So, thank you. Talking about global health, the big challenge that we're facing, we're trying to discover is how do you take a $50,000 incubator in the U.S. and scale it down where you can use it in low resource and low cost environments. But when you do that, you take a perfect incubator, probably with very little risk, and you scale it down. How do you scale down something but address like the risk of producing, say, a $4,000 incubator over a $40,000? How do you go there and find investors that are willing to take the risk?
It's hard to attract investors when you're taking a $4,000 product and making it worth, cost $100, and the margins are going to be small. You can't really raise money. So this is really, it's very difficult to raise money because VCs are not philanthropists, and this is to some extent driven by philanthropy, and I wish people like Gates and others would be more active in investing in those. He's so focused on vaccines that he hasn't done anything in devices. But that's a problem. It's a serious problem.
So do you see like a loss of? I guess you're talking about how historically VCs have been more operators and understood the process, experiences it. That's what it's like, and now it's kind of turned to analysts and people that are looking at the numbers. How have you seen that change the values that are coming into a company? So if you're saying, historically people have been through the process, I assume that people care about what they're doing, maybe in a different way than they care about it now.
I still build companies the same old-fashioned way. I focus on the problem, and it takes me a long time. But I got to the point where I can fund the development of the company and product for several years before I seek outside investment. There's no other solution for it. The other thing I advise, don't go raise friends and family around. That is the worst possible solution for your relationships at work, because there's a higher probability of failure than success. Don't take money from them.
So there's here, Howard. Yeah, you've been raising, and then you and will be done. Yeah.
I was just curious if you had any guiding points on dancing with strategic partners. You've had so many different exits and
I love
relationships and
strategic partners. I have taken money from Boston Scientific, a whole bunch of others. The key is that I don't give them any rights to anything. The minute you do that, you diminish the value of your company. But their money, they're less sensitive to valuation.
One last question.
Also have demonstrated that you like to talk about
investors. So yeah, I don't go to them if my product is so novel. I just invest in it. And I also have a small venture fund that sometimes chips in. But I don't go to very novel thing. So what happens is they'll go and talk to physicians, KOLs, and their opinion, and they'll say, well, I don't know what he's trying to do is worth it. So you always get negative response. So make a lot of money in your first deal, and then you don't have a problem, right?
Excellent way to end the conversation. So much. All right, what's the next slide? All right. Fun part.
All the teams, please come over.
So, Dr. Acharya, you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so how do you want to do this? Call them up one by one?
No, all the teams come up. Everybody. Whole class. Stand in your teams so that judges know who is which team. I will put captains possible. So, and maybe in the order in which you presented. So, okay, if you're on the team number 4, who went second to last? You guys went second to last, all right? And then just stand in that order. Okay.
You mean now to break it down, or?
Now, so judges, what we ask is, you come up one at a time, and you kind of have some maybe general comments if you have. That's applicable to all the teams, and then any comments. Then team by team, you go team by team. Maybe if you have brief comments for each team, what you like, what you didn't like, whatever you want to say. And give them your share of money for that team, and then you go on for 4 teams, and then we ask each judge does that one at a time. And I think it's your comments and why you invested the way that makes it valuable for them. So that's how we do it. All right. So we can start with you. You want to start?
All right, we'll kick us off. All right, first of all, guys, that was absolutely fantastic. Like, we were all blown away. Like the judges, we had such positive remarks and such positive feedback in general. We like that you guys were just so organized, so polished. I mean, you brought your A game, and it showed. We like that when you were going through, you were very methodical about going through your different sections and about checking out everything. There are some areas that we saw across the board that could use improvement, but is also perfectly appropriate for the stage that you're at. We want you all to think a lot more about the financial strategy, and especially in terms of exits. We saw one company present that, but we could have loved to see more from that from you all. But overall, you guys have put in a lot of work, and it shows. So really, just fantastic job. Really like your part. And my firm tracks early stage companies, and I want to track each of you in your journeys. So really, just could not have gone better, from my opinion. All right, so do I pass on? Do I tell them what I'm giving them? Or
Yes. Please tell them how much you're giving each team and why.
Okay, great. All right, so we are doing, so it's a total of 500. We're doing, the first one is 300 going to DEXA. All right, so where's my DEXA team? All right, great job, guys. Okay, so what I really like about this is that I think there's a lot of opportunity for you guys actually not to raise dilutive funding. I think you guys can get really far with non-dilutive funding, especially dual use. You have a huge customer and partner in the government, and I think it's just going to do a lot of good in the trauma scene, especially for not only our warfighters but also civilians and the general population. So I'm giving you guys a lot of cash up front. So I think you can really leverage the non-dilutive options that we have there. All right, and then for each of my other teams, I'm giving you guys each $100 each. So if it's not really 100, it's actually literally $100. Great, fantastic. Okay, I thought they were very strong across the board. You guys will continue to iterate and to pivot and to listen to your customers. And you guys at the end, Luminate, I think you guys are really strong data play, and just keep, listening to your customers. So that's it. Great job, everyone.
So 300 and the remaining 200 divided by 3.
Yeah, yes. 300 and the remaining 200 divided by 3. So, all right, thank you.
awesome job. I won't repeat everything, but you guys do it great. The universal piece that probably applies is you'll hear it ad nauseum, but it takes twice as much time, twice as much money, and that's twice times true, right? It will. You'll be told that you'll do that in your A round, and then you'll do it in your B round. You'll realize, Jesus, it takes lots of time. So fantastic, but great work by all teams. So my dispersion of cash is 200 for DEXA, 200 for Illuminate, for Elevair, and then I'm splitting the balance. So that's the spread of my cash.
So, congratulations. You guys are amazing. You know, presentation, we all get an A or A plus. So, and, you know, you took some difficult problems and tried to make sense out of those. And I think it showed that you all had the ability to analyze problems. And so my advice to you is focus on identifying really high value problems, super high value problems. And then you can ask for more money, you can build a, you know, so I don't, so small, you know, $300 million market, addressable market, it's really small. VCs won't go for it. And you don't want to build those companies on angel investors. So just think about that. But I have, you know, I'm going to give you each, divide the money I have in four groups, right? So I think you all did an amazing job, and congratulations.
No, give the real money later, because you can't give the physical money. So Pranita, you can start. You can start.
Oh.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, again, I agree with everyone. Like, great job, guys. Really, really well done. Congratulations. For me, I think I look a lot at positioning, right? Like how you guys are thinking about positioning your product in the market space. I'm going to record it.
Okay, sure.
Okay?
Oh, I see. You all are right?
Yeah.
So for me, I think a lot about that, right? Like how well do you understand your market and how are you going to position your market? Because when it comes to technology, yes, you have to have a technological value proposition. In some cases, if the technology is extremely incremental, then that does not resonate with me. But as long as you've thought about the technological development and you have the next thing I look for is how well do you understand your market? Do you really understand what it will take you to get to market? Right? Like how is your customer going to adopt it? How are you going to position it? What kind of hurdles will you run into as you're thinking about going to market? And then the other thing that I really look for is the team. Has the team thought through this? Like, do you guys really understand how you're going to work on building this company? So those are my criteria for consideration. For me, I'm still trying to calculate how to distribute the money, so I'm very confused right now. First of all, I didn't get the full 500, I only got 480, so that's the other reason I'm struggling right now.
500 is what you're paying.
But like my top pick was Elevare. I really like how well you've identified the problem. I also really like how well you've thought out the go-to-market strategy for this. DEXA and Akita, you guys tied for me. I like your positioning a lot, Akita. Your product is incremental, right? But you've identified a gap of assessment where you go for months without assessment and the disease can really progress significantly. Now, you're collecting a lot of data. That data can change your technology from incremental to a data play, and that can make the company very exciting for me. DEXA, I love it. I like the problem that you've identified. Your timeline to market is going to be very long. The amount of clinical studies that you will have to do is going to be significant. And I think you need to reconsider your market strategy from the perspective of is it actually going to be the physician who's going to do the test, or is it going to be the nurses? Because ED physicians are extremely time-strapped, and that could, so think about that as your go-to-market strategy is what makes sense, right? And last but not the least, Ruminate. I think you guys have identified a very interesting way to go to market. I think you've identified a problem. I think you're underestimating the adoption strategy, the resistance that you will have to face from an adoption perspective, right? Like what I think changing practices, there can be a significant resistance to adoption, and then in your case, there's the whole liability issue, right? Like if a nurse practitioner is doing it versus a physician, I understand, the physician is a final decision maker in this, but there might be things that you will have to work on to figure out your adoption strategy. I think that's the area that needs the biggest work for you.
So how much money are you giving?
I don't know. Let me calculate.
The 500, how you want?
Give me. Why don't you let him go?
Okay. Nice job to all of you. Very, very nice job. Let me ask if you guys worked hard on this.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you think you did, but if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have not seen anything yet. I'm just going to flag that for you right now. But great start, and a lot of good innovation here in the room. I loved it, and thank you for including me as a part of this tonight. So there may be winners and losers in the early seed round that we're mocking up here. But what I would say long term for you guys, what's going to determine winners and losers is probably the ability to take feedback from folks like this, think about it, incorporate it, learn from it, and keep going. Because you're going to get a lot of stuff coming your way. A lot of it's going to be no or negative or whatever you might not want to hear. Process that, keep going, get up and go again. Okay. I'm not going to critique any of these. I'm just going to give some quick thoughts, and then I'll let you know my dollar spread. So Elevare, great job on the presentation. Good teamwork. I liked your confidence. Where's Elevare? Yeah, good job all around. Get that fundraising plan straightened up and beef it up. Okay, DEXA. I think you're working on a great project. You've got a good innovation. Get DoD support, make it happen, and I think you can turn that into a real business. Okay, Luminate. Let me see what my point was for you guys. Hold on one second. Oh, this one I think is the best and most prominent AI opportunity out of the bunch. So if you're talking to investors right now, that's the magic words. So go tell everybody about that. And then Akita. I think it's important for you guys to be aware there's a $50 billion rural health initiative that was just enacted by, you guys already know this. If you do, great. If you don't, go Google it tonight and
and get on top of the opportunities that are going to result from that. Okay, and then investment, I've got, let me make sure I state this correctly. I've got Elevair at 250. I've got Luminate and DEXA at 100, and Akita for the remainder. So that's my math. Thank you guys, and good job.
I'm going to 150 each to Luminaire, Akita, and DEXA, and 50 to Luminate.
I want to make sure I stated mine correctly. I had Elevair with the larger portion. Okay, good.
Well, thank you all very much. Congratulations. All right. Well, should we wrap up? All right. Well, dinner is ready, and I want to congratulate again all of you for you're all winners. You did an amazing job. You know what? In the past, when we called it Shark Tank, there seemed to be a little more brutal with the feedback. I don't know what it is about the word Dolphin. Maybe we should go back to that. Let's see. What do you think? You've been around.
Dolphins are smart.
Well, amazing job. Please, you can have a seat. Thank you so much for the judges, for all the thought you put into this. If you have additional feedback, if you have sheets that you'd like to share with feedback, specific things, suggestions you have for the teams, they're going into business plan competition season, so please email those to Aditya, and he can share those with the appropriate team. Okay? What's that? You can collect their sheets, but maybe they want to like type up something, I don't know, later on. That's fine. So with that should be end. I just want to thank so much Teria and Emily Jensen for helping so much tonight. I want to thank our fellows, Jay and Sabrina and Sophia and Sardak and Natasha. Thank you all very much for helping me put this together. For our interns, Sarah and Allison, thank you so much for in advance for good pictures. I assume you got my good side.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank Josh and your team for hosting us here. Thank you so much. The Papa Center is amazing. It's amazing, and I'm sure you're going to be seeing a lot of these teams back here under your tutelage soon. And last but not least, I want to thank Aditya Polsani for your leadership on pulling this together. Without you, none of this really happens. So thank you so much. Please have something to eat.
Yeah, there is food, and after the students, we will need your help with cleaning up the chairs and everything. But again, get some food.
Wait, I did a group picture.
Oh, group picture? Oh, yeah.
Where? We can do that here.
Students in the back and the judges in front.
Yeah.
We would like them to go on.
Oh, wow, cool.
Can we put up the projector? I don't know if you want that in the back. Natasha, is there a way to put up the projector?
Oh, we just turn it off.
You don't want that in the back?
It might come backlit. If you want to put it in the back of the dress, you can. I don't know. It might be a bit more cleaner if it's like there. Yeah.
We'll have to turn it off.